It all started on the morning I turned 18. I bought a birthday cake with cash I'd scraped together working odd jobs. The younger kids back at the orphanage were so hyped to celebrate with me. After today, I'd be forced to leave the only home I'd ever known. When I pulled up to the orphanage, a cop car was parked right out front. I honestly didn't think much of it first. I walked inside and called out for Director Wong, the woman who had raised me like her own, but instead of the kids running out to greet me, two police officers stepped forward holding handcuffs. They told me I was the prime suspect in a hit and run. I instantly told them that was completely impossible. I didn't even own a bicycle, let alone a whole car, but they slapped the cuffs on me anyway. I set the cake down on the floor and asked Director Wong to make sure the kids got to eat it. I promised her I'd be back soon, but she just stared at me with pure pity and urged me to confess if I had actually done something wrong. That was the exact moment I realized something was horribly wrong. Down at the station, they pulled up a blurry screenshot from a security camera. It showed a wrecked red sports car with a young guy sitting inside. The guy in the photo looked just like me. Then they tossed a signed document onto the table. Some official paper called a family recognition statement, binding me to a man named Eugene Sean. It claimed he had gifted me an 8 million yuan luxury sports car, and they even presented a blood test linking me directly to the crash site. I'd literally never heard the name Eugene Sean in my entire life. I had never signed a single paper. I had never even laid eyes on that car. And right on cue, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit walked into the room. The second I locked eyes with him, a strange feeling stirred deep inside me. He looked strangely familiar. Even though I'd never met him before, he looked straight at me and said, "I am Eugene Sean. I'm your father." Instantly, every single piece of the puzzle fell into place. The forged signatures, the fabricated evidence, and even my dormitory manager, lying to the police that I wasn't in my bed that night. He had masterminded this entire setup. He looked me dead in the eye and laid it out flat. My younger half-brother, Emin Yuan, had just gotten accepted into an elite martial arts academy. He couldn't afford to let his prized son go to prison, so he needed a disposable scapegoat to take the fall for him. He even promised me a payout after I served my time, saying it with a tone like he was doing me some massive favor. I completely lost my mind and screamed at him. He abandoned me 18 years ago, and now the very first thing he does as a father is frame me for a crime? He didn't even blink. He just coldly replied, "If you weren't my blood, I wouldn't have wasted my time coming to see you at all." And he just turned around and walked out. He hadn't even used my actual blood. He had simply paid someone off to swap the lab results. A month later, I was standing in court. The judge handed down a 15-year sentence for vehicular manslaughter and hit and run. I didn't even bother fighting it. There was simply no point. Every single piece of evidence had been meticulously fabricated to destroy me. Glancing back at the gallery, my so-called father sat there with a completely expressionless face. Right beside him was Emin Yuan, the very brother I was sacrificing my youth and freedom for. He looked up from his phone screen and flashed me a smirk. It wasn't a smile of gratitude. It was dripping with pure contempt. 2 months after that, a prison transport vehicle brought me straight to Haicheng First Prison. The exact second my feet touched the cold ground, a strange, robotic voice echoed directly inside my head. "Compatible host identified. Scanning in progress. Marshall Dow self-improvement system. Successfully bound." I froze for a split second before following the guard right through those iron gates. The moment I stepped into the prison, they made me strip down and searched every inch of me, handing over a fresh uniform along with basic toiletries. I went through the whole process completely mindlessly, like a zombie. It had already been 3 entire months since my arrest. 90 brutal days stuck in a detention center, where I must have thought about appealing my case 1,000 times over. Unfortunately, every single piece of evidence stacked against me had been flawlessly fabricated. I didn't stand a single chance of winning, so I gave up on it. The only thing keeping me going at that point was this mysterious system that had suddenly popped up inside my head. It went by the name of the Marshall Dow self-improvement system. From what I could gather, it would automatically power me up the minute I actually began practicing martial arts. Here was a main problem, though. Where on earth was I supposed to learn martial arts? While locked up inside a prison, roughly a century ago, a strange energy swept across our home planet, Planet Blue. Anyone who practiced ancient combat techniques suddenly gained mind-blowing, superhuman power. And just like that, the martial Dao era was born. Yet, even after all these decades, true martial arts remained a luxury reserved for the rich. Powerful elite families hoarded all the resources, leaving regular folks like me with nothing but impossible dreams. The single ticket out of poverty was securing a spot at a prestigious martial arts academy, which was precisely what my half-brother, Emin Yuan, managed to do. And that was the exact reason why I was rotting behind bars instead of him. Clenching my fists, I told myself, fine, I'll bide my time for 15 years and start training the second I get out. As long as I keep that burning fury alive inside me, I know I can pull through this. When they called my ID number to assign me a cell, an issue immediately popped up. There weren't any beds left. Turns out a bunch of inmates had just been transferred over from another prison. The warden instructed them to throw me into cell number 1 as a temporary arrangement. The guard handing out bed assignments looked visibly uneasy about it, muttering under his breath that cell number 1 hadn't seen a new face in a really long time, and warning that I might not even make it out alive in there. Naturally, the warden couldn't care less. Cell number 1 was situated at the very end of the hallway. Stepping inside, I saw the standard cell layout. 4 bunk beds, space for 8 guys. Surprisingly, though, only 3 inmates were actually inside, which felt really bizarre for a facility that was supposed to be completely overflowing. I offered a polite greeting, but not a single soul replied. On bed 1 was an old, white-haired man lying down, ignoring my existence entirely. On bed 2, a middle-aged guy wearing a black eye patch was sitting up, giving me the exact same silent treatment. On bed 3, there was another old man with a prominent scar, stretching all the way from his eye down to the corner of his mouth. At the very least, the scarred old guy spared me a brief glance. But that was about it. I headed over to my assigned spot, bed number 8, located right beside the toilet, just like my old setup back at the detention center, and began flipping through the prison rulebook. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over me. The old man with the scar was standing right in front of my face. "Kid, you're just a regular guy. So how'd you wind up locked up in here? What was your crime?" I decided to tell him the truth. I didn't commit any crime. I was set up. He smirked, and the jagged scar across his face contorted like a centipede, slithering over his skin as he spoke. "Whoever pulled the strings to frame you must have some pretty heavy influence." I informed him it was the Yi family, a prominent power among Haiching's top 10 clans. Recognizing the name, he asked if Yi Haipeng was responsible, referring to the family's leader. Shaking my head, I clarified that it was Yi Jinshan, the head son. The old man chuckled, dismissing Yi Jinshan as complete trash. Leaning in closer, he asked a question that made my heart race. "Are you hungry for revenge?" Looking up, I said, "Of course I am," but I instantly hung my head again. "There's no way I can stand up to the Yi family." He burst out laughing and declared that the Yi family was utterly insignificant. Yi Haipeng had merely hit the peak of the postnatal realm. So if I could somehow break through to the innate realm, wiping out their entire clan would be a breeze. I didn't even understand what those words meant. Postnatal, innate. He was actually breaking down martial arts stages to me. My eyes lit up as I realized he was offering to train me. "Become my apprentice," he urged. "I'll guide you all the way to the innate realm, and then you can step out of here and obliterate the Yi family. What do you say?" But before I could respond, the guy wearing the eye patch interjected with a bitter laugh. He called the old man a complete fraud, pointing out that he himself was stuck at the upper postnatal stage, meaning he had no right, promising to help anyone reach the innate level. The scarred old man's expression darkened instantly, and he warned the guy with the eye patch to watch his mouth. The eye patch prisoner stood up, cracked his neck, and glared right back at him. "You think you can force me?" Both men, the scarred veteran and the eye patch guy, were ready to throw down. The sheer aura radiating off them made my skin crawl. However, right before blows could be traded, the old man resting on bed 1 spoke up without even budging. "If you 3 don't shut your mouths, I'll chop you up and throw you to the dogs." His tone was calm, almost disinterested, yet both men immediately fell silent and backed off to sit down. That reaction alone gave me all the answers I needed. The figure on bed 1 was effortlessly the most dangerous person here, by a mile, so I decided to do something insane. I stepped right up to his bed and bowed deeply, begging him to accept me as his disciple. With my heart hammering against my chest, I waited, only to be met with 2 harsh words: "Get lost." A sudden wave of invisible force slammed right into me, knocking the wind out of me. Stumbling backward, I retreated in disappointment and settled onto my own bunk. The scarred old man, Hu Lingfeng, as I would learn shortly after, flashed me a thumbs up. He pointed out that the figure on bed 1, Elder Qian, would never take on an apprentice. Then he pushed his pitch once more, reiterating that at 18, with 0 martial arts foundation, even though I was getting a late start in the game, he claimed to have a method tailored specifically for me. He assured me I could break into the postnatal realm within just a few years. Now, that wouldn't be enough to take down the head of the Yi family, their ultimate patriarch. but it would give me more than enough power to absolutely destroy Yi Junshun. Still, something about his sudden generosity raised red flags. I mean, a total stranger doesn't just hand over game-changing power for free. At the end of the day, though, I was completely out of options. Elder Chin wouldn't even give me the time of day, and the guy with the eye patch wasn't making any offers either. So, I decided to take the deal. I dropped to my knees just like they do in those old-school period dramas, and addressed him directly as Master Hu. Li Yinfeng burst out laughing and officially took me under his wing. From there, he started breaking down the fundamentals of martial cultivation for me. Turns out, there are 4 major realms in total: body tempering, postnatal, innate, and grandmaster, with every single realm split into 4 distinct stages: entry, minor achievement, major achievement, and peak. My journey had to begin at body tempering, which basically meant I had to harden my muscles, bones, and skin until they were literally as tough as iron. He told me he was going to pass down a special method called the myriad tribulations body forging technique. The best part? It didn't require any crazy physical workouts. Instead, I just had to channel spiritual energy directly into my body using specialized breathing techniques, allowing it to strengthen me entirely from the inside out. Before we could get started, though, he had to plant a furnace seed inside me to forcibly clear out my energy pathways. Right on cue, the eye patch guy let out another cold sneer. I picked up on it immediately. That wasn't just irritation, it was pure mockery. He clearly knew something I didn't. I paused, turned straight to Li Yinfeng, and asked him directly, what was his actual price for doing this? His eyes instantly narrowed, and his tone dropped to absolute zero. Once you hit the minor achievement stage of the postnatal realm, he said, I need you to eliminate someone for me. I immediately pointed out the massive flaw in his plan. If he couldn't take this target down at major achievement, how on earth was I supposed to pull it off at just minor achievement? He explained that raw power wasn't the issue here. He couldn't do it himself because he was trapped in this prison forever, whereas I'd be walking out as soon as my time was served. He refused to reveal the target's identity just yet, claiming I had to reach the required cultivation level first. Even so, I held out my hand without hesitation. I desperately needed this power. He grabbed my wrist and forced a surge of strange energy right into my body. A sharp pain hit me as I felt a physical lump move up my arm, travel over my shoulder, and finally settle deep in my lower belly. He actually seemed pretty surprised that my energy channels weren't clogged up, given how late in life I was starting. Without wasting time, he began reciting the cultivation chant. It was super short, only a couple hundred words, but incredibly cryptic and insanely complex. Yet the exact second he finished, my system interface pinged in my mind. Congratulations, host. You have successfully mastered the Northern Darkness Divine Art. I completely froze. He had just called it the Myriad Tribulations Body Forging Technique, but my cheat system identified it as the legendary Northern Darkness Divine Art. Those were 2 entirely different martial arts techniques. Playing it smart, I acted like I hadn't memorized it yet. After all, no ordinary beginner could possibly master it on the very first try, and asked him to repeat the chant one more time so I could listen closely. I tuned him out completely. Instead, my eyes were glued to the system's breakdown of what I had just acquired. Turns out, the Northern Darkness Divine Art was way more than a simple physical buff. It gave me the ability to siphon martial energy from others. Catch was, it came with 2 huge catch-22s. First, I couldn't drain anyone stronger than myself. Second, the target had to be practicing the exact same technique. If I tried siphoning someone using a different skill, both our energy networks would instantly implode. That's when the eye patch guy's sarcastic snort hit me, and everything instantly made sense. Nothing in life is free. Hu Linfeng wasn't being some generous mentor. He was passing this down to me so that down the road, once I got strong enough, he could use me like a human power bank. I was literally being raised as a cultivation furnace. I made sure to play dumb and keep my mouth shut. So when Hu Linfeng asked if I was following along, I just pretended a few parts were too complex for me. He bragged about it being a high-tier secret technique, capable of pushing someone all the way to the Grandmaster stage. So obviously a rookie like me would struggle with it. He forced me to listen to him recite it 8 whole times, before finally tiring himself out and retreating to his bunk. Right on cue, the eye patch dude chimed in, mocking Hu Linfeng for chanting such a rare skill out loud. Wasn't he scared someone else would steal it? Hu Linfeng just snapped back, saying if the guy wanted to learn it so badly, he should just bow down and call him master. They were practically at each other's throats again, until the old man in bed, one shifted in his sleep, and both of them instantly went dead silent. Sitting back on my bed, I started putting the puzzle together. Hu Linfeng's story about training me to take out his enemy. Once we got out, total fake news. His real game plan was to fatten me up like livestock, then harvest my cultivation, using the Northern Darkness absorption ability. If the system hadn't exposed the technique's true nature, I would have walked straight into his trap clueless. Here's the plot twist, though. The absorption trick goes both ways. Since he practices the same method, in theory, I could drain his energy instead. I decided to play the waiting game. If he actually tried using me as a battery, I'd flip the script on him. But if he was genuinely sincere, I wouldn't stab him in the back. After all, he did teach me. I shifted my focus back to my mental system interface. It was super minimalist. Just a floating blue screen with 3 basic lines. Host, Iwu Dao. Realm, Mortal. 0 out of 1000. Skill, Northern Darkness, Divine Art. Status, Unlearned. Progress, 0 out of 1. No buttons, no clickable menus. Literally nothing. I stared at it for a solid few minutes, getting pretty annoyed. Is this thing totally useless? I complained in my head. What's the point of giving me a system if it doesn't even do anything? The literal second I thought that, a fresh pop-up notification flashed on the screen. Turns out the technique took my words as a personal insult. It literally started cultivating on its own, and my proficiency immediately shot up by 10. Right then, it realized I was getting old and only had mediocre talent. So it figured taking matters into its own hands was the only way. Boom, my proficiency instantly jumped up by another 20 points. Then, determined not to let a weak master drag it down, it pushed itself even harder, adding 30 more points to the board. I was completely blown away. So this was how the self-improvement system worked. It wasn't about me working hard to get stronger at all. The skill itself actually had its own feelings, and it would train all on its own, if I pushed its buttons right. So, I decided to test my theory. Is that really all you've got? I taunted in my head. Feeling totally disrespected, the technique grinded twice as hard out of spite. Another 10 points gained. Yep, my hunch was spot on. The secret was to just keep talking trash and provoking it. But then a thought crossed my mind. If it's called self-improvement, shouldn't it just train automatically, without me having to constantly babysit and provoke it? I switched up my strategy to see what would happen. Hey, can't you just practice by yourself? Aren't you supposed to be self-improving here? And guess what? It worked. The technique gained a mind of its own and triggered auto-cultivation mode. 10 proficiency points per minute, guaranteed. On top of that, I was gaining 1 realm experience point every single minute. Pure passive gains without lifting a single finger. Absolutely hyped. I decided to press my luck even further. You're still way too weak. Step it up. Big mistake, guys. The technique completely overworked itself, trying to impress me, and ended up triggering a full-on cultivation deviation, freezing it dead in its tracks for 24 whole hours. I panicked for a second, but quickly switched to a gentler tactic. Hey, it's okay, no rush. Take all the time you need. We're in this together, we'll grow stronger side by side. Instantly, the deviation vanished into thin air. Feeling all motivated and inspired, the technique jumped straight back into auto-training. Only this time, it was cranking out 20 proficiency points and 2 realm points per minute. That's literally twice as fast as before. Now I finally cracked the code on how this whole system works. It wasn't just about endlessly berating and bullying it for stats. I had to play mind games, balancing harsh words with sweet encouragement. Push it too hard, and the whole thing breaks down completely, but show it a little warmth at just the right moment, and it bounces back stronger than ever. Basically, I literally had to master the art of emotional manipulation on my very own martial arts skill. At this insane rate, my technique was going to hit the entry stage. In less than an hour, breaking through to the entry level of body tempering was only going to take around 10 hours max. Not bad at all, if you ask me. So, I just chilled on my bed, fake meditating to put on a show, while behind the scenes, my technique was doing all the heavy lifting completely on autopilot. Over on bed 3, Huli phone was glaring at me, with this cold, smug little smirk plastered on his face. Meanwhile, I just kept watching those proficiency numbers skyrocket on my system panel. The only thing running through my head was the glorious day. I'd finally bust out of this place and make Eugene Sean and Emin Yuan pay tenfold for what they did to me. Fast forward 50 minutes, and the Northern Darkness Divine Art smashed straight through to 900 proficiency points. At this point, I started getting a little paranoid. Mastering an entry-level skill in under an hour was definitely going to raise some serious red flags. I tried telling the technique to take a breather and rest up, reassuring it that it was already plenty strong enough. But it flat out refused, and a system notification popped up to warn me. The technique straight up took offense to that suggestion, boldly declaring that absolutely nobody was going to stop it from gaining more power. All I could do was sit back and watch those stats climb. 9, 20, 94, 60, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. This was literally my very first time cultivating, my first time ever breaking through any kind of bottleneck. Then, right as it hit 1,000, something shifted. A surge of warm energy suddenly flared up in my lower belly. It was that furnace seed who Yinfeng had planted inside me. It started pulsing hard, wrapping a wild wave of energy around my whole body. My muscles began twitching and stretching entirely on their own. My heart was beating like crazy, and my joints were crackling and popping. And that loud popping noise instantly blew my cover. Hu Yinfeng shot up from his bed like a rocket, staring directly at me in complete shock. Technique entry, body cleansing, he muttered under his breath, while the guy with the eye patch looked just as stunned. Even the old man resting on bed one cracked his eyes open for a brief second before shutting them again. It felt like thousands of tiny ants were crawling right under my skin. Super tingly and strange, but weirdly enough, not painful at all. Honestly, it felt kind of good, and the whole thing lasted about 30 seconds. Right on cue, the system chimed in to confirm I'd achieved technique entry, slapping on a bonus 100 realm experience points for good measure. Even better, my auto-cultivation speed had doubled. Proficiency was now shooting up by 40 points every minute, and realm experience was ticking up by 4 per minute. At this rate, I was in a break into the body-tempering realm in just a couple of hours. But that speed was a huge problem. Hu Yinfeng had literally just said that even top-tier talents take roughly a full year to hit major achievement in body tempering. Yet here I was about to smash through major milestones in mere hours. If he caught on to this, he'd get suspicious, or way worse, he might try to harvest me early. I really needed to play my cards right. So the second I opened my eyes and saw both Hu Yinfeng and the eye patch guy staring right down at me, I decided to play dumb. I innocently asked my master why my body felt so insanely itchy. He just smirked and pointed down at me. I took a look, and my prison uniform was completely drenched while a nasty, foul stench punched me straight in the nose. Underneath my clothes, my skin was coated in a layer of thick black sludge, grossly slick and sticky just like lard. Hu Yinfeng broke it down for me, explaining that it was just impurities being purged from my body, which meant the technique was actually working its magic. He then told me to go hit the showers, since the stench was becoming completely unbearable. Inside our cramped little cell, I casually asked if we were even allowed to shower at a time like this. Back in a holding center, showers were strictly limited to odd-numbered days, 10 minutes tops in a communal washroom. Hu Yinfeng just gestured toward our private bathroom area and smirked, saying this cell played by its own set of rules. When I stepped inside, I completely froze. Was this seriously a prison bathroom? It was decked out with a real shower, an actual bathtub, and both a squat toilet and a western sitting toilet. It even had a proper wet and dry layout, looking way nicer than most luxury hotel bathrooms. After 3 grueling months of scrubbing myself over a cold concrete trough in a detention center, this place felt like absolute paradise. There were even high-end, brand-name shampoos and body washes sitting right there on the shelf. So I took my sweet time and enjoyed a full 30-minute wash. It was easily the most refreshing shower I'd enjoyed in months. Stepping back out, I couldn't help asking Lian Feng if every bathroom in this prison was this luxurious. He just rolled his eyes, making it clear that cell number 1 was a total exception. Turns out this block was strictly kept for martial artists at or above the postnatal realm. Because of that, the standard prison rules didn't apply to us. The meals were high tier, the amenities were way better, and we had total freedom to do whatever we wanted. Naturally, there was a catch. He warned me that living in a place like this had its dark side, too. When I pressed him for details, he kept his mouth shut and told me I'd see for myself tonight. He advised me to eat up, recharge, and stay on high alert, hinting that things were about to go down. Plus, he promised to give me a front row seat to what the true, ruthless world of martial arts was really like. By 5:30, I was completely famished. That intense cultivation session had burned all my energy, leaving my stomach feeling entirely empty. Back in a holding center, the food was as basic as it gets. A pair of plain steam buns for breakfast, a simple meat and veggie dish for lunch, and just cabbage or potatoes for dinner. So naturally, I was bracing myself for more slop. That is, until a guard pushed in a giant 3-tiered cart overflowing with feast-level food. Braised pork knuckles, full steamed chickens, roasted lamb ribs, savory pork belly, and steamed fish, an absolute meat lover's paradise. There wasn't a single leaf of green in sight, not even a bowl of rice. The guard signaled to the 3 inmates, then glanced over at me, ordering me to head down to the regular cafeteria. I stood up feeling a bit crushed, but Hu Yangfeng immediately cut him off. He made it clear that I was dining right here from now on, and demanded the guard fetch an extra plate for me. The guard tried to argue back, claiming I was just an ordinary nobody, who didn't deserve the premium treatment, reserved for real martial artists. Hu Yangfeng's eyes narrowed dangerously, his voice turning deadly calm. He declared that I was officially his personal disciple, and if the guard had an issue with that, he could drag the warden in here to talk to him directly. He then threatened to completely wreck the entire block if his own meal didn't arrive instantly. Terrified, the guard practically sprinted out the room, forgetting to even lock the door behind him. Hu Yangfeng handed me a dish stacked with an entire braised pork knuckle and ordered me to dig in. He explained that now that I was on the path of cultivation, my body desperately needed massive amounts of protein. He stressed that I should never train on an empty stomach, since it would severely stunt my growth, telling me to just ask whenever I needed a refill. For a split second, I felt a lump in my throat. He was treating me with genuine warmth, making me question if I had misjudged him all along. Maybe he really was just a caring master, and I'd been way too paranoid, but then reality kicked in. Of course, he wanted me fed and healthy. A stronger foundation simply meant a richer pool of power for him to harvest later. If that sinister scheme was truly his goal, I needed to keep my guard all the way up. I'd find out his true motives once I reached the minor achievement stage of the postnatal realm, assuming he was actually legit. If he can pull that off, I'd genuinely be honored to call him my master. I hesitated and asked if it was really fine for me to devour the entire pork knuckle, considering no one else had even touched the food yet. That's when Hu Lionfeng pointed toward Elder Qian lying on the bed, explaining that a master like him had long transcended the need for ordinary food. After the guy with the eye patch, who I later learned was named Zhang Hongguang, he just shrugged it off, saying he didn't give a damn. After all, a kid who just started his cultivation journey desperately needed all those calories. Suddenly, Zhang Hongguang's tone turned dead serious. He gave Hu Lionfeng a stark warning. If he was actually planning on dragging me down to the rift tonight, he better keep me safe and watch my back. He bluntly added that he shouldn't come crying for help when everything goes south. Hu Lionfeng just waved him off casually, asserting that he had everything under control. Now, I had no clue what this rift was, but it definitely sounded dangerous. A few minutes later, the guard rolled back in with a whole new cart overflowing with food, and it was all for me. He then leaned in and whispered something to Hu Lionfeng, asking if the warden wanted to know if I was heading down to the rift too, to slay monsters, now that I was receiving cell number 1 perks. Hu Lionfeng gave him a firm nod, confirming it, while reminding the guard that the incentive program applied to me as well, meaning every monster I killed directly shaved time off my sentence. Now that instantly caught my attention. Slaying monsters could actually chop down my 15-year prison term? My mind was racing with a million questions. What even was this rift? What kind of monsters were down there? But Hu Lionfeng just told me to save my breath until tonight. Why get to experience it firsthand? He mentioned that after I rested up, he'd pass down a martial technique to me, so I'd at least have a fighting chance to defend myself down below. I went back to scarfing down the food. Honestly, that 1 pork knuckle barely scratched the surface of my hunger. So I snatched up a bowl of savory braised pork belly and started inhaling it like a beast. My body was burning through calories at an insane rate. At that moment, I truly felt the reality behind the old adage. Studying costs copper, but martial arts cost gold. If an ordinary family ever tried to feed a martial artist, they'd end up bankrupt just buying groceries. Right after finishing the pork knuckle, I polished off a whole steamed chicken, a whole fish, and a solid pound of beef. Zhang Hongguang stared at me with raised eyebrows, remarking that I actually had incredible potential for martial arts, because anyone who could eat this much naturally possessed a solid foundation. He reminisced about how back when he first started training, he had an appetite just as massive, but could only fill his stomach with plain steamed buns and rice. That severe lack of proper nourishment back in the day had severely held back his growth. He was convinced that if he'd had better meals, he might have already broken through to the innate realm by now. Hu Lionfeng just burst out laughing at that claim. He scoffed, pointing out that innate realm warriors in the entire city of Haicheng could be counted on 2 hands, brutally reminding Zhang Hongguang just how many years he'd been stuck at the peak of the postnatal realm. That comment hit right where it hurt. Zhang Hongguang just rolled his eye and went completely silent. I couldn't help but notice that despite their relentless bickering, The two of them never actually crossed lines or threw hands. It seemed like they were saving all their real strength for whatever lay inside. The rift. I kicked back on my cot, feeling truly full for the first time in months, satisfyingly watching my system's stats skyrocket. An hour later, Hu Lionfeng woke me up, letting me know it was time to master a combat skill. He immediately dropped into a deep stance, knees bent and rooted as solid as a mountain, before demonstrating the 8 Extremes fist. He explained that this was an ancient killing style. No flashiness, no wasted energy. The whole concept was simple. When you strike, you throw your entire body weight behind it. Every single punch he threw whipped up a sharp, explosive sonic boom in the air. It was downright brutal. Zhang Hongwang, watching from his bed, just started clapping sarcastically. He scoffed that the 8 Extremes fist was only good for beating up average folks, but completely useless against real monsters. Standing up, he promised to teach me something vastly superior, without any warm-up or taking a stance. He lunged forward with a single step and unleashed a devastating blow. The sheer shock wave shook the room. He dubbed it the Mountain Collapse Fist. It was literally just one move, but that single move packed terrifying power. He pointed out that early on in cultivation, you don't need 100 fancy techniques. You just need one attack that gets the job done. Hu Yanfeng was absolutely livid. He snapped back that Mountain Collapse was a post. NATO level art, way too advanced. For a rookie who hadn't even finished body tempering yet, my body was simply too fragile to survive the recoil. He argued that the 8 Extremes fist was the far safer path. It builds a rock-solid foundation, tempers the body, and balances both offense and defense. Zhang Hongwang immediately shot back. What's the point of a balanced defense if you can't take down the enemy before they rip you apart? While they kept bickering, I quietly opened my system panel. Sure enough, both moves were already logged. A brand new section had appeared under my skill list. Martial Arts, 8 Extremes. Fist required 1,000 EXP to hit beginner level, while Mountain Collapse Fist required 10,000. That massive tenfold gap told me everything I needed to know. Mountain Collapse Fist was on a whole different level. That's when Elder Chien finally chimed in. He sat up straight for the very first time since I walked in, his voice immediately cutting off their argument. He stated that both of them had a point. 8 Extremes was perfect for setting a strong base, while Mountain Collapse offered lethal firepower, even for low-tier fighters. His final ruling? I should just master both. Glancing at me, he added that I had 30 minutes to familiarize myself with the forms before we headed straight into the rift. He instructed Hu Yinfeng to supervise me. Hu Yinfeng then asked if I managed to grasp the demonstrations. I nodded for both, which completely threw him off. I had made up my mind. There was zero reason to play dumb anymore. My system was already grinding these skills nonstop, and I couldn't pause the auto-cultivation even if I tried. It was better to let all 3 of them assume I was some kind of martial genius. If Hu Lianfeng believed I possessed insane talent, he'd think twice before attempting to drain my energy. And if Elder Chien took a personal interest in me, he might just step in to save me if things ever went south. Lin Feng eyed me up for a second, before smirking and saying he really lucked out picking me up. I just offered a silent smile back. Honestly, when Lin Feng made that lucky comment, I couldn't tell if he meant he was lucky to score a gifted student, or lucky to find a human battery to drain dry. Shifting my focus inward, I began working on these 2 newly acquired martial techniques. I decided to try the exact same trick I use on the Northern Darkness Divine Art, comparing them to it, to guilt-trip them into action. 8 Extremes Fist, Mountain Collapse Fist. Can't you 2 take a lesson from the Northern Darkness Divine Art? It's been grinding non-stop since it showed up, while you 2 just sit back doing absolutely nothing. Taking the bait immediately, both techniques reacted to the provocation and kicked off their training. However, things took a totally wild turn. Rather than just grinding quietly inside me, like the Northern Darkness Divine Art did, both techniques literally exited my body to go hunt down opponents. All on their own, the system notified me that they chose to level up through actual battle, and had actively set off to track down enemies. Right away, the notifications began flooding in. 8 Extremes Fist ran into a tier 1 beast and engaged in combat, gaining a bonus 50 proficiency points. Mountain Collapse Fist followed suit right after. The system alerts just kept popping up back to back, leaving me completely speechless. It turns out combat moves functioned in a totally different way, compared to a cultivation method, while the Northern Darkness Divine Art remained inside me, silently cultivating and pushing my cultivation realm higher. These offensive skills went out roaming into the wild, picking fights with monsters, and farming EXP straight from real battles. Even better, all the combat mastery they gained was directly downloaded right into my mind. I could literally feel new battle instincts taking shape, impeccable timing, striking angles, and reflexes I never possessed before. Almost like combat experience was being hardwired into my brain. I must have been grinning like a total fool, because Zhang Hongwang suddenly snapped me back to reality. Kid, mastering martial arts isn't the same as meditating. Get off your butt and move. I quickly threw out an excuse, claiming I needed a moment to process what I'd just been taught. That instantly sparked yet another fight between the two of them. Hu Linfeng warned Zhang Hongwang to stay out of it, but Zhang Hongwang clapped right back. And this time around, he dropped a line that validated my worst fears. You know full well what the Northern Darkness. Divine art is actually for old man. Hu Linfeng's eyes instantly narrowed. Are you seriously trying to step in? Have you forgotten the unwritten laws of the martial world? Zhang Hongwang took a quick glance at me, turned back to Hu Linfeng, and let out a sigh. Fine, this is strictly between you and your apprentice. None of my concern. At that moment, I was 100% certain. Hu Linfeng was setting me up to be a cultivation furnace all along. And Zhang Hongwang knew the truth right from the start, which totally explained all those cold scoffs he kept throwing out. He felt it was a complete waste since I clearly possessed real talent. Yet the rules strictly forbade him from interfering in the affairs between a master and his disciple. He glanced over at Elder Qin, who was sitting on bed one with his eyes closed. He was truly my only remaining hope. If anyone had the power to stop Hu Linfeng, it was him. Deciding to test the waters, I casually asked Hu Linfeng what his argument with Zhang Hongwang had been about. He brushed it off as nothing more than an old grudge, telling me not to worry about a thing other than my training, so I didn't push it. I simply wasn't strong enough to confront him yet. I stood up and began executing the 8 Extremes Fist. After just one full set, my entire body felt completely light and energized. Next, I decided to try the Mountain Collapse Fist. This one was much tougher, making my body strain under the intense force. But I still managed to whip up a surge of wind with my punch. Zhang Hongwang's eyes lit up the moment he saw it. But then he cast a glance toward Hu Linfeng and simply shook his head with a heavy sigh. Truth be told, both of them were stunned. I had only seen each technique demonstrated a single time, yet I was already pulling them off with solid form. Hu Linfeng even picked up on a seasoned, veteran edge in the way I threw the 8 Extremes Fist. What he didn't realize was that the technique itself was out there, battling monsters and feeding real-time combat experience straight back to me. Right then, Elder Qin stood up, checked the clock on the wall, and uttered just 3 words. Time's up. Let's go. Everyone fell in a line, and I fell in right behind Hu Linfeng, while Zhang Hongwang followed Elder Qin. Before we stepped out, Elder Qin looked back at me and warned me to stick close to my master and not go straying off. Hu Linfeng's expression flickered for a fraction of a second. The moment Elder Qin said those words, a glint of something dark flashed behind his eyes, only to vanish the instant Elder Qin looked his way. Elder Qin walked up to the cell door and placed his hand lightly onto the handle. Instantly, the heavy door swung open all by itself. No key, no guard in sight. The padlock hanging on the outside had somehow been unlocked right from inside the cell. I stared in utter disbelief. If he possessed that kind of power, this cell was never a prison to him at all. He could waltz out whenever he pleased, which made me wonder, why stay here? What could possibly keep a man this insanely powerful locked up? By his own choice, Elder Qin led us out of the cell and down the hallway. It was 8 p.m., and every single prisoner was locked inside their cells. Yet we were casually strolling through the corridors, like we owned the place. When we arrived at the main security gate, Elder Qin stepped right up to the facial recognition scanner. It chimed with an authentication successful, and the electromagnetic lock disengaged, allowing the massive iron door to swing wide open. I could hardly process what I was witnessing, an actual inmate unlocking the facility's high-security doors, because his own face was registered as an authorized user. Leaning over, I whispered to Hu Linfeng, asking why on earth we were still staying in prison, if we had the freedom to walk out whenever we wanted. He let out a low chuckle and began to explain, revealing that the physical prison walls weren't what truly confined them. The guards here were high-level martial artists in the outside world, enforcing every sentence with absolute authority, meaning any inmate foolish enough to attempt an escape would wind up dead in the streets by the very next morning. The sole path to freedom was earning it through military merit, which is precisely why the spatial rift existed. He broke down the details to me as we made our way through, explaining that ever since spiritual energy swept across the planet. Massive spatial fissures began tearing open everywhere. These dimensional rifts led straight into alternate realms, teeming with ferocious creatures known as demon beasts. Our task was simple: venture inside and slaughter them, preventing them from breaching the border and invading human territory. For every tier 1 demon beast you brought down, a single day would be shaved off your prison sentence. Taking down a tier 2 beast reduced it by 2 days, scaling up accordingly. Looking at my own 15-year sentence, if I managed to slay 1 tier 1 beast every single day, I could potentially walk out a free man in about 7 years. Curious, I asked whether tier 1 beasts were easy targets to eliminate. Hu Liangfeng simply shook his head at my naive question, informing me that even the absolute weakest, unranked beasts were far beyond my current capabilities. Beasts were roughly equivalent to body-tempering realm cultivators in strength, and not the low-level ones either, as most tier 1 monsters could easily go toe-to-toe with someone at the major success stage of body tempering. The apex tier 1 beasts actually demanded a postnatal realm warrior to deal with them. Even Hu Liangfeng himself, despite reaching major success in the postnatal realm, only dared to hunt tier 1 beasts on his runs, refusing to risk his life going after a tier 2 monster. Hearing this, Zhang Hongguang shouted back from the driver's seat to interject, claiming that Hu Liangfeng's real issue was nothing more than his pathetic combat techniques, rather than his cultivation level, since an average postnatal warrior should easily handle a tier 2 beast. Hu Liangfeng immediately fired back, mockingly asking if Zhang Hongguang would ever dare to go head-to-head against a earth-splitting beast, which was considered the undisputed king among tier 2 monsters. That call-out shut Zhang Hongguang up instantly. Stepping outside the main prison facility, towering guard posts lined the perimeter walls, and though the sentries on watch spotted our group, they immediately turned their gazes away, deliberately turning a blind eye to our presence. A sleek black van stood idling right near the main entrance, and Zhang Hongguang quickly hopped into the driver's seat, while Hu Liangfeng instructed me to get into the back. I hesitated for a second, feeling that the rear seating area should be reserved for the senior members. But Elder Qian barked at us all to quit dawdling and move. So I scrambled inside, just as Zhang Hongguang slammed his foot on the gas. The sudden acceleration slammed me hard against the seat back, and before I could even process what was happening, we sped directly out through the heavy prison gates, without a single guard moving to stop us. Once we were on the open road, I turned to ask Hu Liangfeng why he had previously claimed he could never secure his freedom, given that Zhang Hongguang explaining to me my master had once completely annihilated a minor martial family, wiping out over 30 lives and earning himself a life sentence in the process. Truth be told, even if capital punishment, the sheer would have warranted the death penalty hundreds of times over, he still had more than 9 centuries left on his sentence. So even if he took down 10 tier 2 beasts every single day, for the rest of his life, it wouldn't be enough. Zhang Hongguang wasn't in much better shape either. He'd slaughtered 8 and was still staring at over 300 years behind bars. So I asked why they even bothered, putting their lives on the line in the rift, if freedom was completely off the table. Hu Liangfeng explained that slaying beasts earned them points that could be if he managed to break through to the innate realm, maybe, just maybe, there'd be another way to gain his freedom. He stole a glance at Elder Qian as he said it, before going silent, prompting me to look over at Elder Qian as well. If Hu Liangfeng believed reaching the innate realm, and Elder Qian was clearly on a whole different level than anyone else in our cell, then Elder Qian had to be at the innate realm already, or perhaps even higher, but nobody said another word after that. An intense silence as we drove all the way to the coast. When the van finally pulled to a stop, I peered out the window, stretching out as far as the eye could see. Where's this rift supposed to be? I couldn't see a thing. We stepped out of the van onto a deserted beach, and Elder Qian led us into the coastal mountains, followed by Zhang Hongguang. Then Hu Liangfeng, with me bringing up the rear. Deep out of nowhere ambushed and surrounded us. One of them leveled a rifle right at us, demanding to know our identities. First prison, Qian Tianlong, leading a team into the rift. That was the very first time I learned his full name. Qian Tianlong, a name that definitely fit him. They asked for the security clearance passcode, and he provided it without hesitation. Just like that, the soldiers melted back into the forest so quickly, I couldn't even spot where they were hiding. We pressed deeper into the dense woods, as the pace grew faster and faster, and pushing through all the thick thorns and brush was completely draining my stamina. Sure, I'd stepped onto the path of martial arts. But physically, I was still no different from a normal human. I hadn't even reached the body tempering stage yet. As I started lagging behind, Hu Linfeng noticed, snagged me by the back of my collar. And instantly, I felt light as a feather, practically gliding through the trees at breakneck speed. After a few intense minutes, the thick canopy cleared out to a high cliff overlooking the sea. Without a second thought, everyone ahead of me leaped straight off. First Elder Qian, then Zhang Honghua, followed right by Hu Linfeng. I rushed to the edge and looked down. It wasn't some endless, bottomless pit. Right below me was a massive black tear torn into reality itself, roughly the size of a giant cargo truck. Tiny spiderweb fractures radiated outward around it, with an orb of glowing purple light pulsing at its core. So this was the rift. I grit my teeth and leaped into the void. The roaring wind screamed past my ears. The massive rift engulfed me completely. Waves of intense vertigo crashed over me as my body spun out of control, dragged along by an unseen power. When the wild ride finally stopped, I opened my eyes to pure pitch darkness. Turns out, we'd landed right in the middle of a vast grassland. At first glance, it almost felt just like Blue Star, except there wasn't even a moon in the sky, just total blackness. Save for the dim lights of an encampment, roughly 100 meters off. Elder Qian mapped out our plan. Hit the outpost first, to gear up with weapons before heading down to the canyon. I fell in line right behind them, tossing questions to Hu Linfeng along the way. He filled me in, explaining that the drop zone was always random, usually scattering folks within 100 meters of the base. They deliberately set up the outpost at a distance, so newly arrived recruits wouldn't crash headfirst into one another, or land right on top of someone's blade. As for the immediate area surrounding the camp, it had been cleared of beasts a long time ago, with daily security patrols keeping it completely secure. That's when I picked up on something. The security here felt way looser than back on the Blue Star side. Hu Linfeng nodded, pointing out that it made total sense. All those heavy fortresses back on the cliffside were meant to keep clueless civilians out and prevent vicious monsters from breaching our realm. But inside the rift itself, every single person who stepped foot here was a battle-hardened warrior. Because of that, the guards only needed to double-check that you weren't some creature in disguise. The camp was lined with endless rows of tents, flanking a wide central pathway where warriors packing all sorts of deadly gear moved back and forth. Elder Qian and Zhang Honghua kept pressing forward, but Hu Linfeng suddenly pulled me to a halt, saying we had to make a quick pit stop first. He dropped a bomb on me. I needed to register as an official demon slayer, the mandatory legal identity required to operate within the Rift Realm. Without that license, any beast I managed to slaughter wouldn't count a single bit toward reducing my prison sentence, and I wouldn't even be allowed to check out weapons from the armory. He went on to explain that being a demon slayer was far more than just holding a basic entry pass. The more monstrous beasts you wiped out, and the higher your honor merit climbed, the higher your social standing rocketed. The top-tier demon slayers held authority that placed them above the entire Blue Star Federation itself. And that was the real reason the guards treated the convicts in cell number 1 with such deep respect. Sure, we were prisoners on paper, but we were also active demon slayers, fighting on the ultimate front lines. And if a convict racked up enough monster kills, they could wipe their criminal record totally clean, secure a fresh identity, and hell, even climb the ranks to become a Federation senator. All it took was raw strength to earn it. Following Hu Linfeng's lead, I headed toward a dull gray tent sitting on the left side of the road. Stepping inside the gray tent, I spotted a young guy in a blue uniform handling all the intake registrations. Hu Linfeng nudged me to hand over my legal name and prison ID. The clerk punched the info into his terminal, then shot a completely stunned look right at me. Wait, you're just a regular unawakened person? Before things got awkward, Hu Linfeng immediately cut in, stating that I was his personal disciple and he'd be taking responsibility for me. He flashed a brilliant silver medal straight out of his pocket, his official Demon Slayer badge. The clerk scanned the token, verifying the high-tier status. Silver rank, Demon Slayer. Postnatal Major, Achievement Realm. He was fully authorized to bring a recruit along on beast hunts, though he made sure to warn us to steer clear of the canyon, a dangerous area crawling with second-tier beasts. Once Hu Linfeng pointed out that our squad was backed by a gold-rank Demon Slayer, the staff member immediately backed off. He grabbed a sleek black badge out of a drawer, registered it into the database, and set it on the counter. Congratulations, Wu Dao. You're officially a Black Iron Demon Slayer. He then broke down the scoring rules. 1 point for every first-tier beast. 2 points for second tier, and so on. Hitting 10,000 points was the key to advancing to bronze rank. Since I was an inmate with 15 years left on my sentence, I needed to rack up exactly 5,475 points to earn my complete freedom. The badge came equipped with an integrated tracking system, meaning every single kill I made would be recorded automatically. No badge meant no points, plain and simple. I pinned the black badge securely onto my chest, taking down over 5,000 first-tier beasts, or roughly half that amount in second-tier beasts, was certainly no walk in the park. Once we stepped outside the tent, I asked Hu Lianfeng how his own sentence was coming along. He let out a heavy sigh, revealing that in his 6 years at the prison, he had barely managed to accumulate just over 40,000 points, which wasn't even close to reaching gold rank. At the rate he was going, he was still 50 years away from getting out. And realistically, he wouldn't survive long enough to see that day. His only actual shot at survival was breaking through to the innate realm, just to extend his natural lifespan. When I brought up Elder Qian, Hu Lianfeng admitted that he couldn't reveal any specifics. He mentioned that if Elder Qian wanted me to know his backstory, he'd tell me himself, but he did drop one detail. Elder Qian's sentence was more than double what his and Zhang Hongwang's were combined. However, Elder Qian wiped out beasts at insane speed, and was already on the verge of hitting gold rank. That meant he had already amassed somewhere around 8 to 900,000 points, yet even with a massive haul like that, he still hadn't fully cleared his sentence. I couldn't even fathom what kind of heinous crime could carry such a staggering penalty. Meanwhile, Zhang Hongwang had only been locked up here for 6 months, but as a peak postnatal cultivator, he was capable of slaying around 22nd tier beasts a day, already putting him at roughly 8,000 points. Maintaining that pace meant he'd be a free man in about 10 years. Hu Lianfeng then noted that cell number 1 used to house a lot more inmates. Some managed to earn their freedom, while others met a grim end inside the rift. Eventually, we stopped outside a massive tent, which served as the armory, and Hu Lianfeng instructed me to wait outside. Renting even the most basic gear required at least 1 point, and I didn't have a single one to my name. He headed inside and emerged a few moments later holding a heavy broadsword. I ended up asking him why no one seemed to use firearms, since it seemed like common sense that monsters were made of flesh and blood too, meaning bullets should be effective against them. He just chuckled and told me to take a good look around. I scanned the entire encampment, and sure enough, he was right. Not a single fighter was carrying a gun, aside from the guards stationed on the watchtowers. He went on to explain that gunshots act as a magnet for monsters. The rift was infested with tens of thousands of deadly beasts, so a single gunshot would instantly trigger a massive swarm. The Federation had actually attempted using firearms back when the rift was first uncovered, and the resulting body count was catastrophic. Ever since that disaster, everyone strictly relied on melee weapons and blades, spears and bare hands. Turns out, those watchtower firearms were strictly meant for base defense, not for hunting beasts. So, I trailed right behind him, heading toward the spot where Elder Qian and Zhang Hongwang were already waiting. Just past the camp stood a massive parking lot, packed with hundreds of parked vehicles. Elder Qian was standing by, holding a long spear in his hand, while Zhang Hongwang held a curved blade. Meanwhile, Hu Lianfeng carried his own saber. They threw all the weapons into the trunk, but since it wouldn't latch shut, they just left it propped open, and we all piled inside a gray van. Hu Lianfeng pulled a tablet out from the glove compartment and immediately started shouting out directions, while Zhang Hongwang took the wheel. Right then, it hit me why Hu Lianfeng had made me ride in the back. Back on Blue Star, this was their standard setup. Zhang Hongwang drove. Hu Lianfeng handled the GPS and scanned for threats, and Elder Qian sat in the back as the group's powerhouse, eyes shut, ready to leap into action at any second. As we drove, a system ping suddenly chimed inside my head. The 8 Extremes fist had officially hit the entry stage, barely a single hour after I first picked it up. It turns out the skill's auto-battling feature, grinding monsters on its own, had massively sped up my progress, and the moment it broke through, a massive wave of advanced martial insights flooded my mind, almost as if a grandmaster was personally guiding me through its ultimate secrets. I pulled up my status panel and saw my realm experience sat at 450, while the Northern Darkness Divine Art had already gained 2,500 proficiency points in its entry level. In roughly 3 more hours, I'd officially break through into the body tempering realm, and my Divine Art would rank up to minor mastery. That growth rate was thrilling but terrifying at the same time. I had 3 veteran martial artists sitting right beside me, and if they noticed anything strange happening with my body, Things could get ugly real fast. Without thinking, a small sigh escaped my lips. Hu Yangfeng caught it immediately and asked what was troubling me. I quickly covered my tracks by saying, I was just dwelling on what Yi Junshan had done to ruin my life. That sparked a revelation I definitely didn't see coming. The moment I dropped the bomb that I was actually Yi Junshan's love child, dead silence fell over the entire vehicle. Even Elder Qian cracked his eyes, open to throw a sharp glance my way. Zhang Hongguang chimed in, asking why a father would ever set up his own kid like that. So, I laid out the whole ugly truth. How Yi Mingyuan killed someone in a hit and run. How they took advantage of my resemblance to him. And how they fabricated every single piece of evidence to frame me. Zhang Hongguang spat that it was absolutely sickening. But then Hu Liangfeng dropped a piece of backstory I had never heard before. He explained that Yi Haipeng, the head of the Yi family, had always despised Yi Junshan for being a completely useless coward. So to lock in the clan's future standing, he forced a political marriage between Yi Junshan and the third daughter of the influential Li clan. The patriarch of the Li family, Li Yaozu, was an absolute powerhouse at the innate realm. In short, this marriage was just Yi Haipeng's way of latching his pathetic family onto a massive powerhouse, leaving Yi Junshan completely wrapped around his wife's finger. Hearing all that, Zhang Hongguang finally connected the dots. He pointed out that the whole plot to frame me was almost certainly orchestrated by Yi Jinshan's wife. A spineless coward like Yi Jinshan, coming from the prestigious Li family, would never dare take the risk of exposing an illegitimate son all on his own. His wife must have caught wind of my existence and decided to manipulate me as a pawn to throw away. That was when Zhang Hongguang dropped a heavy truth on me. Kid, this vendetta of yours isn't going to be an easy one to settle. He went on to explain that seeking payback wasn't just about taking down the Yi family. It meant declaring war against the powerful Li family as well. And the Li family had a formidable warrior at the innate realm, standing at their peak. Simply breaking into the initial stage of the innate realm wouldn't cut it. I would likely need to master the intermediate stage of the innate realm, just to stand a fighting chance. He couldn't help but chuckle when I talked about reaching the innate realm myself, reminding me that if it were that simple, he wouldn't still be trapped at the peak of the postnatal realm. In his 90s, I stared straight ahead and declared, as long as I'm breathing, I will make them pay what they owe. A heavy silence fell over the car. Elder Qian arched an eyebrow and shot me a glance. Choosing to stay quiet, we drove on for a few more minutes, until Zhang Hongguang slammed on the brakes. Hu Yinfeng informed us that we had to cover the rest of the distance on foot. The rumble of the motor and blinding headlights would provoke the deadly beasts lurking in the canyon up ahead. All three of them grabbed their weapons from the trunk, and Elder Qian instructed me to stay close behind and hold my position right at the peak of the ridge, overlooking the canyon. He made it crystal clear that I was not to descend under any circumstances. With that, he burst forward like a fired arrow, the ground shattering beneath the sheer force of his kick. Zhang Hongguang bolted right after him with equal speed, while Hu Yinfeng threw one final glance in my direction, before sprinting after them. Their velocity was terrifying, moving at a pace that rivaled speeding cars on a highway. I stared in awe at the tracks they left behind. Deep, crushed depressions with fractures spreading in all directions, and then broke into a full dash to keep up with them as best I could. Just a couple of minutes later, the air echoed with fierce shouts, war cries, and the terrifying roars of monsters rising from the depths. The moment I reached the edge, I froze. They had referred to it as a slope, but it was practically a sheer, vertical cliff wall, with barely any incline to speak of. Climbing down on my own was an absolute impossibility. Down below, giant floodlights illuminated the entirety of the canyon floor. Dozens of human warriors wielding cold weapons were locked in a bloody, life-or-death struggle against monstrous beasts. Creatures unlike anything I had ever laid eyes on before. Some closely resembled wolves, yet dwarfed fully grown tigers in size. Others looked like wild sheep, armed with long, razor-sharp horns. There were beastly boar-like monsters, encased in heavy, natural armor plates, and even stranger beasts that defied any kind of description. None of them were the half-human beastmen I used to imagine from video games. They were genuine animals, just unnaturally colossal and insanely violent. I couldn't pinpoint where Hu Yinfeng or Zhang Hongguang were in the chaotic brawl. There were simply too many warriors swinging blades. However, I spotted Elder Qian almost instantly. He stood out as the sole combatant wielding a long spear, and he wasn't standing shoulder to shoulder with the other fighters. He had plunged completely solo straight into the heart of a monster pack. surrounded on all sides by more than a dozen bloodthirsty beasts. Yet nobody could manage to approach him. His spear became a spinning blur of thrusts, sweeping and stabbing relentlessly, and every few moments another creature crashed to the ground lifeless. He vaulted 7 or 8 meters straight up into the air. At a certain moment, I spotted a brilliant white aura coating the tip of his weapon. That instantly jogged my memory about what Hu Liangfeng had explained to me. Physical tempering refines the physique, postnatal cultivation hones. Internal force, an innate stage refines vital energy. That luminous glow had to be qi, the immense power belonging to the innate realm. I stood frozen in place, watching the spectacle in total fascination. Then, a gravelly voice suddenly echoed from behind me. "Hey kid, what the hell are you just standing around here for?" I whipped around to find 4 individuals striding right toward me. 3 middle-aged men, accompanied by an elderly woman, all of them gripping identical styles of broadswords. My stomach instantly plunged. Hu Liangfeng had specifically warned me about encountering figures carrying matching weapons while inside the rift. That always meant they belonged to a powerful clan or sect, and those factions wouldn't think twice about slaughtering anyone. I quickly stammered that I was just waiting for my master, and they demanded to know who my teacher actually was. I blurted out, "Hu Liangfeng," hoping the mention of his name would frighten them away. But instead, it achieved the exact opposite. The leader's eyes instantly narrowed, before he broke out into a freezing, malicious laugh. "Hu Liangfeng? That bastard? And his little disciple." He proceeded to tell me how Hu Liangfeng had previously butchered his own junior martial brother and looted their faction's prized possession, the Four-Blade Sect's ultimate secret manual. They had hungered for vengeance for years, but lacked the strength to challenge Hu Liangfeng face to face. And now here I was, his personal student, completely alone and completely helpless. He called it an absolute blessing sent from the heavens, declaring that he would butcher me as a sacred sacrifice to his fallen brother. I cursed my miserable luck inside. I had thrown Hu Liangfeng's name around just to keep myself safe, but instead it had painted a massive target squarely on my back. These 4 thugs were likely hovering around the minor achievement stage, of postnatal cultivation at best, far too weak to ever defeat Hu Liangfeng, but more than powerful enough to snuff out someone like me. I realized I had only one single choice left. I hollered at the top of my lungs, "Fine, I'll take you all on." And right at the precise second they expected me to aggressively charge forward, I whirled around instead and bolted straight toward the sheer drop-off of the cliff, plunging headfirst down into the deep canyon, swarming with dangerous monsters. I knew perfectly well I couldn't fight those 4 cultivators, nor was there any way I could outrun them on flat ground. Even the most inexperienced martial artist moved significantly faster than an ordinary human. Like me, my absolute only lifeline was escaping down into the canyon, where Hu Liangfeng and the rest of them might finally spot me. I sprinted toward the steep slope, but the moment my foot touched the precipice, I lost my footing entirely and tumbled out of control. The slope angle was practically vertical, sending me flipping forward and rolling rapidly downward, violently crashing against jagged rocks and hard dirt repeatedly. The entire world started spinning as excruciating pain flared up everywhere, and then my vision faded completely to black. I only learned what happened afterward while I was still knocked out. The members of the Four-Blade Sect never bothered to chase after me, because their leader, that old hag, explicitly told them that any ordinary human plummeting from that extreme height was guaranteed to die, for sure, and they weren't about to risk having the guards catch them. So they vanished right into the night. My fall immediately caught the attention of the fighters below, and Hu Liangfeng spotted a prison uniform tumbling down the cliffside. He instantly broke away from the armored boar he was clashing with, yelled out my name, and bolted right toward the slope. But Elder Chien reacted even faster. He slammed his foot down, leaped high into the air, and somehow kicked off thin air itself, soaring across over 100 meters to catch me at the very bottom. When Elder Chien examined my condition, the damage was severe. I was completely unconscious, suffering from numerous fractured bones, ruptured blood vessels, and multiple torn energy meridians. He slammed his palm against my back and channeled a surge of white mist, his own chi, straight into me. I snapped awake from the agony, every inch of my body aching so fiercely that I could barely force a word out. I managed to explain everything to Hu Liangfeng, how the Four Blades took out their grudge against them on me, and how they had me completely trapped. His expression darkened with absolute fury as he gripped his saber, ready to hunt those bastards down immediately. Elder Chien instantly shut him down with a single sentence. You created those enemies, and your disciple paid the price for it. That's just how this world works, he stated cold-heartedly. He noted my injuries would take a solid 2 or 3 months to heal up, then ordered Hu Linfeng and Zhang Hongwang to carry me back to the camp's infirmary tent. Zhang Hongwang lifted me up with extreme care and surged up the near-vertical cliff face, as if he were just walking up a set of stairs. As they hauled me away, I couldn't hear what Elder Chien said to Hu Linfeng in private, but I found out all about it much later. Elder Chien had laid it out plainly, stating he knew Hu Linfeng was intending to use me as a human furnace to siphon away all my cultivation. He pointed out that even if the scheme succeeded, Hu Linfeng would only advance for major achievement to the peak postnatal realm, which still wasn't nearly enough to break out of prison or exact revenge on anyone outside. Instead, Elder Chien proposed a completely different approach. Let me grow, since my potential was the real deal. If I grew powerful enough, I could carry out Hu Linfeng's vengeance for him instead. He also dropped a heavy warning on Hu Linfeng, reminding him that I likely already knew the true, terrifying nature of the Northern Darkness divine art. Hu Linfeng didn't respond right away. He told Elder Chien he'd give it some serious thought before heading over to check on me. Elder Chien watched him leave, shook his head in disapproval, and muttered something under his breath about a twisted twist of fate. Then he turned back toward the invading beast horde. He had his own score to settle in the outside world, and at his current grind, he'd be earning his freedom in just 2 or 3 years. He couldn't afford to waste a single night slacking off. Meanwhile, I was lying flat on a medical bed inside the camp's infirmary, as a doctor relentlessly operated on me for 2 straight hours. The final damage report? 3 fractured ribs, a snapped leg bone, 2 broken bones in my hands, and deep gouges all over, some so severe you could see raw flesh exposed underneath. They reset my broken bones, encased me in plaster casts, and wrapped me up in heavy bandages from head to toe, to the point I practically looked like a mummy. The doctor laid it out for Hu Linfeng. I was stuck in bed for the next 2 months, and couldn't engage in any physical training at all. However, I could still rely on internal cultivation to accelerate my recovery. Hu Linfeng sent Zhang Hongwang back out to slay more beasts, while he wheeled my stretcher out of the encampment and headed toward the return gateway. Curious, I asked where we were going, and he clarified that the portal leading back to Earth wasn't the same one we used to enter. It was an entirely separate doorway, situated near a small pond right on the edge of the camp. I then asked why they hadn't set up the base right beside it. He explained that the spatial tear was extremely unstable, constantly expanding and contracting without warning. At times, it would flare up enough to consume everything in its path. Maintaining that distance was a necessary precaution, protecting them from the rift's volatile nature, as well as surprise beast ambushes. As we moved along, I kept firing questions at him, having seen other inmates battling in the gorge. I wondered why we hadn't run into any of them. When we were departing, he pointed out that Haiqing housed over 10 facilities, most equipped with special blocks for martial artists like us. However, cell number 1 enjoyed a special privilege. We moved out at 8 a.m., a full hour ahead of everyone else. On top of that, the other convicts were merely at the body tempering stage, meaning they stuck to safer hunting zones, rather than the dangerous canyon where Tier 2 beasts roamed. Next, I asked why we only hunted at night. He clarified that during the day, the monsters abandoned their nests to go foraging, scattering all over the area, which made things far too risky. At night, massive spotlights installed in the canyon tricked the creatures into believing daytime had arrived, funneling them toward a single zone, where hunters could wipe them out efficiently. I then questioned why we even bothered hunting them, instead of simply blocking them from crossing over to Earth. Hearing this, Hu Linfeng chuckled. Monster meat significantly boosted a warrior's vital energy, while their hides and bones were refined into valuable elixirs. Furthermore, this alternate realm harbored rare spirit herbs that greatly accelerated training. The Federation wasn't pouring massive resources here. Out of pure goodwill, the potential profit was astronomical. Even so, humanity had mapped out less than 1/10,000th of this dimension. Our sector was literally just the outer perimeter, the safest area available. He added that a party of Grandmaster-level fighters had once attempted to explore deeper into the unknown, only to return with 2 dead and 8 heavily injured. Grandmasters, the absolute pinnacle of power on Earth, were nearly wiped out just by pushing a little further in. This realm was vastly more terrifying than I'd ever imagined. Inquired about the monster meat and elixirs. He clarified that every resource was strictly regulated. You could either redeem them using merit points, or gain access through martial academies. The Federation was heavily funding the growth of martial talent, and anyone demonstrating true potential, getting scouted by an academy, if I managed to score an early release. And honestly, academies had all the best cultivation resources, high-tier techniques and skills, stuff that was way easier to get than grinding endlessly for points. Inside the rift, right then, I remembered Jin Shan mentioning that Emin Yuan had already secured a spot in a top martial arts academy, which was pretty ironic, considering that was the whole reason I took the fall. To protect his bright future at that very academy, I quietly made a promise to myself. Once I got out, I was heading there too. Not as some scapegoat taking the blame for someone else, but strictly on my own merit. Hulian Feng started wheeling my hospital bed along the walkway that spanned across the pond, heading straight into the return rift. That familiar wave of lightheadedness washed over me as everything spun, signaling my return to Blue Star. My very first trip into the Rift world had been an absolute nightmare, yet even completely covered in heavy bandages and plaster, stuck lying flat on my back. I felt a spark I hadn't experienced in months, pure curiosity and an unquenchable hunger for power. I cast one final glance back at the gloomy world behind us, swearing to myself that as soon as my body healed up, I'd be stepping right back in. But as we crossed through the portal and made it back to Blue Star, we ended up on the complete wrong side of the shoreline, miles away from where our ride was parked. Hulian Feng tried pushing my heavy gurney across the sandy beach, but the tiny casters immediately sank right into the sand. With a heavy sigh, he scooped me up into his arms and just started walking. He was moving fast, yet insanely steady. I barely felt a single bump. The moonlight finally broke through the heavy clouds, bathing the two of us in a pale, silver glow. For a good few minutes, neither of us said a word. I just stared up at the open night sky, silently processing everything that had gone down. Out of nowhere, he dropped a question that made my blood run ice cold. Do you actually know what the Northern Darkness, divine art really does? I froze up completely. Had I accidentally slipped up and exposed myself? I didn't think so, but before I could even decide whether to play dumb or lie, he kept talking. He pointed out that the deeper secrets of the technique became pretty obvious once someone reached the entry level and could fully decipher the ancient text, meaning it'd be stranger if I hadn't figured it out by now. He told me to just lay it out in the open, reassuring me that even if I knew the dark truth, he wasn't planning on making a move on me just yet. So I spilled it. I quoted the critical passages word for word, explaining how it steals and absorbs another person's internal energy, locking it deep within your own body, like the vast, endless northern sea. I also cited the strict warnings: never siphon power from someone stronger, and never drain anyone who's cultivating a completely different art. If you mess up either rule, the conflicting energies will clash, completely destroying your meridians. I told him straight up that the second I read those dire warnings, I instantly connected the dots on what he had lined up for me all along. My mom used to tell me that nobody ever shows total kindness to a stranger without an ulterior motive. He went silent for a beat, then broke out into a chuckle, admitting he was actually impressed. Those subtle warnings were heavily masked within the cryptic verses, and back when he first picked up the art himself, he hadn't managed to decode them at all. That is, until my mentor broke it all down for me. He explained, Elder Chien wasn't wrong about your actual potential. And that's when the light bulb went off. Elder Chien had pulled him aside for a private chat, right after they hauled me away. Now, Li Yinfeng didn't beat around the bush. He told me Elder Chien left the choice entirely up to him, which is why he was confronting me directly. I didn't hide anything from him either. I expressed my gratitude for his guidance, but made it clear I had my own blood feud to settle. If he planned on treating me like a disposable cultivation furnace, I wasn't about to just lie down and take it. He just nodded and decided to lay all his cards on the table. He confessed that his original plan was to drain my energy the moment I reached the minor postnatal realm. However, Elder Chien had made him realize that even if he pulled it off, he'd only hit peak postnatal at best, still nowhere near enough to break out of this prison, and definitely not enough to exact his revenge. He was already pushing 70, and a postnatal martial artist caps out around 100 years old anyway. He'd never escape on his own, so he pivoted. Instead of draining my life force, he wanted me to inherit his vengeance. Turns out his actual target wasn't some low-level nobody like he said before. That was all a cover story. His true vendetta was against the Zhang family, the absolute undisputed powerhouse clan of Haicheng. Years ago, right after breaking through to the major postnatal stage, he accidentally got on the wrong side of a guy named Zhang Yuanlin. In cold-blooded retaliation, Zhang Yuanlin slaughtered Hu Linfeng's entire family. 6 innocent lives. To strike back, Hu Linfeng hunted down and killed 30 members of Zhang Yuanlin's wife's family. After that, he willingly handed himself over. Prison was literally the only place the Zhang family's reach couldn't touch him, since the whole facility was tied to the Rift World and guarded by literal Grandmaster-level powerhouses. Now, Zhang Yuanlin himself was just a weak, minor postnatal scrub, so he wasn't the issue. The real nightmare was his father, Zhang Jinya, a major innate warrior. In the entire city of Haicheng, only the Demon Slayer commander outranked the guy. Everyone else bowed down whenever Zhang Jinya made an appearance. And then, Hu Linfeng dropped a bombshell about Elder Qian. That completely reshaped my perspective on everything. It turns out Elder Qian Tianlong, was also thrown into this prison by Zhang Jinya. Qian Tianlong used to run the infamous Green Dragon Gang, which was the dominant force in Haicheng back in the day. He was a minor innate warrior, more than strong enough to run the streets as he pleased. That is, until Zhang Jinya hit the major innate stage first and completely broke him, wiping out his entire organization from the ground up. So Hu Linfeng pointed out that if I could secure Elder Qian's full backing, not just some passing curiosity, we'd actually stand a real fighting chance at getting revenge. The problem was right now, Elder Qian only saw me as a mild curiosity. Getting him to actually care and invest in me? Well, that was going to take something extraordinary. It was going to require a whole lot more effort than what I put on display so far. Hearing that left me totally speechless. Turns out Elder Qian and Hu Linfeng were both gunning for the exact same foe, the Zhang family, the single most dominant clan in all of Haicheng. And leading them was Zhang Jinya, a terrifying warrior at the major innate stage. If someone like Elder Qian, who was already at the minor innate level, had been completely crushed by the guy, then what chance in hell did I stand against him? Noticing my sudden silence, Hu Linfeng asked if I was getting cold feet. He reassured me that it was totally fine if I wanted to back out. Since we were being straight with each other, he promised he wouldn't hold it against me one bit. Honestly, he'd be satisfied if I just managed to wipe out Zhang Yuanlin. Whenever the opportunity presented itself, I looked him in the eye and said I wasn't scared at all. I was just doing the math, trying to calculate how many years it would take me to reach that major innate rank myself. He let out a chuckle, so I gave him my word that I'd deliver, telling him he'd better stay alive long enough to witness the good news. He chuckled and pointed out that my hit list was getting pretty damn long. First the Yi family, then the Li family, and now the Zhang family. That's literally 3 of the top 10 powerhouse clans in Haicheng. He advised me not to let the pressure get to me, and to just take things one step at a time. I nodded along, but deep down, I was overflowing with confidence thanks to my cheat system. Crushing them was only a matter of time. After that heart-to-heart, something fundamental shifted between the two of us. That invisible wall of tension and suspicion completely vanished. I could literally feel a massive weight being lifted off her shoulders. For the remainder of the trip, he did all the talking while I just listened intently. He broke down the major sects and martial arts factions ruling this world, including the Four-Blade sect, the very group that had almost put me in a coffin. Turns out, their absolute strongest fighter was that old crone, their sect master, and she was barely at the entry postnatal stage. In the grand scheme of things, she wasn't even a real threat. The whole grudge actually started because Hu Linfeng had paid one of their members a cool 2 million for a secret martial technique. But that greedy bastard pocketed the cash and refused to hand over the secret manual. So naturally, Hu Linfeng killed him and snatched it anyway. Yep, that's just how vendettas work in the martial world. It's all about money, bloodshed, and stolen secrets. I made a mental note right then and there. The moment I got out of prison, the Four-Blade sect was going to be the very first target on my list. He also dropped some intel on the Demon Slayer commanders. Turns out it wasn't just a single person, but an elite squad of Grandmaster-level warriors who rotated between different cities every year to guard the dimensional rifts. These spatial cracks were tearing open all across Blue Star, becoming more frequent with each passing year, which was precisely why the Federation was aggressively pushing the development of martial arts nationwide. Word on the street was that 10 Grandmasters had once ventured deep into the heart of the Rift world, only to run into monstrous entities far beyond their comprehension. That deadly encounter likely exposed humanity's location to whatever terrifying beings lurked on the other side. And if those cosmic horrors ever decided to launch a full-scale invasion on Blue Star, it would mean total extinction. Curious, I asked him what realm existed beyond the Grandmaster level. He couldn't give me a solid answer, though. He had only ever stumbled upon a vague reference in an ancient text, pointing to something known as the Martial Tao. Golden Core, though I wasn't entirely sure if that was its actual name. We managed to get back to the prison right around 10 p.m., since the dimensional rift only stayed open from 8 p.m. until 6 the next morning. There really was no point in Hu Linfeng heading back out there, so he just stuck around in the cell with me, resting in bed, completely covered in bandages. That's when I pulled up my system menu. In just the hour or so since I had last checked, the Northern Darkness, Divine Art had already stacked up another 3,500 proficiency points, pushing my realm experience up to 790, putting me right on the verge of breaking through into body tempering. The 8 Extremes Fist was sitting at 1,800 proficiency, while the Mountain Collapse Fist was trailing behind at a mere 1,900. It was high time to give it some pep talk. Mountain Collapse Fist, you're slacking off, I thought to myself. And guess what? It worked. The technique instantly got fired up, surging its growth speed to 20 points per minute. Next up, I turned my focus to the 8 Extremes Fist, the only skill I hadn't pushed to its absolute limit yet. 8 Extremes Fist, just take a look at Mountain Collapse Fist over there. It hasn't even hit entry level. It's already about to pass you up. Instantly, the skill spiked to 40 points per minute. And right away, went out of its way to brawl with a Tier 1 monster, just to score an extra 50 bonus points. So now, all 3 of my martial arts have been provoked twice, which was the absolute safe limit. If I try to push any of them a third time, they'd fall right into that dangerous chi deviation state, just like the Northern Darkness Divine Art almost did earlier. Knowing when to hold back was every bit as crucial as knowing when to go all out, and I had definitely learned that lesson the hard way. Less than an hour later, it finally happened. My realm experience officially hit 1,000. A wave of intense heat erupted from my lower dantian and rushed through every single inch of my body. My muscles began twitching uncontrollably, not randomly, but in a strange, rhythmic pulsing. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was going to burst right out of my ribs, while my skin flushed burning hot, soaking through all my medical wrappings in seconds. Beneath the bandages, my wounds started itching like crazy, and I could actually feel deep sensations, where my bones had been fractured, almost as if they were rapidly fusing back together on their own. I started gasping heavily, desperate to cool my body down. Hearing me struggle, Hu Linfeng bolted straight up out of bed and rushed over, convinced that my injuries were taking a turn for the worst. But after staring at me for a few seconds, he completely froze. Are you breaking through to body tempering? He immediately recognized the telltale signs, the muscular spasms, the heavy sweating, the intense body heat. After all, he had gone through this exact same process decades ago. What totally blew his mind, though, was that I was doing it, while literally lying on my back, completely wrapped in bandages. He reached down, ripped open the gauze over my chest, checked my racing heartbeat, and confirmed it. I was legitimately advancing right then and there. He just stood there, speechless, from a moment he first passed down the Northern Darkness. Divine Art to me, until right now, barely 4 hours had passed in total. To put that in perspective, it had taken him a whole month to achieve that very same breakthrough. And even the most gifted prodigy he had ever met in his life still required 3 full days. Yet I had pulled it off in a mere fraction of that time. As the burning heat finally subsided, I slowly opened my eyes. The very first thing I did was raise my left arm. You know, the one that got completely wrecked. Just hours ago, it was totally paralyzed. Now I could lift it with barely any discomfort. Glancing down at my shredded bandages, those deep, bloody gashes that looked horrific were already crusting over into scabs. Even my fractured ribs stopped throbbing. Sure, my right shin and left arm still felt sore, but it was nothing compared to the agony earlier. Then, Hu Linfeng asked if I noticed anything weird while practicing. I shook my head, so he sat beside my bed and dropped a piece of lore on me. He explained that in the martial arts realm, there were legends about mythical figures blessed with a unique gift, a sacred martial physique that turned training into something as effortless as breathing. These prodigies could pull off in minutes what took normal people years of grueling effort. He mentioned the greatest genius he ever knew took 3 whole days to achieve body tempering. Meanwhile, I pulled it off in just 3 hours. He wondered out loud if I possessed this sacred physique. I almost burst out laughing. It wasn't some special body. It was just my system carrying me while I laid around doing nothing. Honestly, though, this cover story was perfect. If everyone bought into the idea that I had a god-tier body, then no matter how insanely fast I leveled up, they just think it was totally normal. So I played along. I acted clueless and said I didn't feel anything strange, except that once I grasped the basics, this warm energy just started circulating on its own, almost like my body was cultivating on autopilot. I basically detailed my system's actual process, just rephrased it a bit, and let his imagination connect the dots with whatever crazy theory he wanted to believe. Hu Linfeng suddenly grabbed my wrist to check my pulse himself. He froze immediately. He felt it too, a steady stream of energy, flowing smoothly through my meridians, even though I wasn't meditating or trying at all. Under normal logic, internal energy only moves when you actively practice. Otherwise, it stays completely still inside your dantian. What was happening to me defied all martial principles. When he asked when it started, I feigned innocence, claiming it had been running continuously ever since. He showed me the manual. He just stared at me, dumbfounded, muttering endlessly about the legendary sacred martial physique, that mythic body type that lets you cultivate effortlessly. He mentioned he'd need Elder Chien to personally inspect me upon returning, considering Elder Chien was far more knowledgeable. Roughly 30 minutes later, the Northern Darkness Divine Art reached minor mastery. A pop-up informed me that my proficiency speed shot up to 80 points per minute, and Realm EXP boosted to 8 per minute. Instantly, a massive surge of warm energy exploded inside me, way denser and stronger than anything before. As it settled back down into my dantian, the sensation felt so insanely good that an accidental groan slipped out of my mouth. Hu Linfeng caught the sound and whipped around, only to see visible trails of energy radiating right off my skin. It was a sign he recognized instantly, the telltale sign of the Northern Darkness. Divine Art breaking through to minor mastery, where the meridians simply can't hold all that surging power. Minor mastery already? He whispered. 5 hours. That's all it took from learning the technique to hitting minor mastery. He had spent half his life cultivating, just to reach major mastery, and looking into his eyes, I could tell something deep inside him was shattering. Maybe his pride, or his entire concept of reality. He asked if my martial arts also trained on their own, so I decided to lean fully into the prodigy act. I gave him a nod, and told him I'd randomly feel fresh combat insights popping into my head, almost as if the moves were practicing themselves. He wanted me to demonstrate the 8 extremes. Fist right then and there, but caught himself when he noticed my heavy casts, telling me to just rest instead. Then he stared up at the ceiling, and began muttering to his late master, wondering if this was some kind of miracle from above. I told him I was completely wiped out and needed sleep. Honestly, it had been the craziest day of my life. Transferred to prison, unlocking the system, getting taken in as a disciple, entering the Rift world, nearly dying off a cliff, and breaking through to body tempering, all in a single day. I shut my eyes and passed out cold. Next thing I knew, I woke up to Hu Linfeng calling my name, with 3 faces leaning over me. Hu Linfeng looked stressed. Zhang Hongguang looked fascinated, and Elder Chien was holding my wrist, his brow deeply furrowed. Bizarre. Pretty bizarre, el Bird. Even while he sleeps, his technique keeps cycling. His physical body is being nonstop empowered by internal energy. I've never witnessed anything like this in my entire life. Hu Linfeng pressed him, asking if I possessed the sacred martial body. Elder Chien shook his head, explaining that he'd never actually seen one in person. The sacred martial body was something that only existed in ancient lore and legends. Those ancient texts spoke of people who mastered arts effortlessly and cultivated way faster than ordinary folks. But there was zero mention of techniques running on autopilot. What I had was something he'd never even heard of, let alone witnessed. He then asked if I felt any discomfort from this automatic cultivation process. I told him no, that I felt completely fine. He stared at me silently for a long moment, then patted Hu Linfeng on the shoulder. Old Hu, you really struck absolute gold this time. I can't pinpoint what his exact condition is, but next to him, even the sacred martial body pales in comparison. A technique that literally trains itself automatically. I've never even heard of such a thing in my life. This world really is full of crazy miracles. I just lay there, quietly celebrating inside. All 3 of them were totally convinced my insane power came from some ultra-rare constitution. Body condition. My act as a prodigy was completely rock solid. Zhang Hongguang let out a sigh, mentioning how much of a pity it was that such a promising talent I'd ended up stuck with Hu Liangfeng. Naturally, that sparked their usual bickering, with Hu Liangfeng bragging about his sect lineage, and Zhang Hongguang reminding him that he was only ever an outer disciple. Elder Qian stepped in and shut them both up, saying there was no reason they couldn't both instruct me, because with how insanely fast I picked things up, what he was actually worried about was whether they'd run out of things to teach me. Zhang Hongguang then turned his gaze toward me and asked if I'd be open to taking on a second master. I threw a quick glance over at Hu Liangfeng, who just gave a shrug and said it was totally up to me. He broke down that in today's martial world, learning from multiple mentors was actually pretty standard. Modern martial arts academies were teaching students techniques from various traditions all at once, and even the highest-ranking grandmasters were pushing to make martial arts accessible to everyone. Old-school sect secrecy was becoming a thing of the past. Zhang Hongguang brushed off all the formal protocol, telling me not to bother kneeling and just call him master. He admitted he wanted to see just how far my potential went, offering to pass down a skill known as the limitless art, which he claimed was easily on par with the Northern Darkness. Divine art. At that, Hu Liangfeng and Zhang Hongguang immediately got into a heated debate over who deserved the title of first master and who was going to be second master. Right in the middle of their petty fight, Zhang Hongguang accidentally let slip that if Elder Qian decided to accept me as a student too, he'd end up stuck as third master. The entire room went dead silent. Zhang Hongguang realized his slip of the tongue and instantly began apologizing. But Elder Qian just broke into a smile. He noted that the slip-up actually made him want to take me under his wing. Titles didn't matter to him in the slightest. He was simply curious to see just how far someone blessed with my level of genius could go. Then he dropped a remark that made everyone in the room hold their breath, claiming that reaching a level beyond Grandmaster wasn't impossible for me. He then asked me point-blank if I'd accept him as my master. I was completely floored. Just this morning he told me to beat it, and now he was offering. I immediately cupped my hands and bowed, declaring, "This disciple greets his first master." Elder Qian quickly settled the master order based on age. He would be first master, Hu Liangfeng would be second, and Zhang Hongguang third. Nobody raised an objection. Zhang Hongguang was eager to teach me his limitless art right then and there, but Hu Liangfeng brought up a serious issue. The Northern Darkness divine art couldn't be practiced alongside any other style. The opposing energies would clash within the body, leading to a lethal cultivation deviation. Zhang Hongguang argued back, pointing out that his limitless art could guide someone all the way to the realm of a peak grandmaster, whereas the Northern Darkness, the divine art, could only cap out at entry-level grandmaster, without the advanced manual to push it further, which Hu Liangfeng didn't even have on him. That's when Elder Qian jumped in and admitted that his own personal technique topped out at major achievement grandmaster. He pointed out that the truly top-tier manuals capable of going higher were strictly locked away deep within the Demon Slayer organization and the hidden sects, and you could only access them once you hit the grandmaster realm. On top of that, technique incompatibility was a massive issue, since most high-level skills straight up clashed with one another. Then he took a brief pause before mentioning he had something special, a secret technique both of them would definitely recognize. Zhang Hongguang put the pieces together first, asking, "Wait, are you talking about the primordial chaos art?" Hu Liangfeng's eyes went completely wide. He noted that the primordial chaos art was legendary. It sent massive shockwaves through the martial world when it first emerged, but literally everyone who ever attempted to practice it ended up failing. It was basically treated as a purely theoretical scroll, completely impossible to master in real life. Its sole intended function was to merge different martial arts into a single technique, carrying zero combat power of its own. Elder Qian nodded and argued that just because others failed, it didn't mean I couldn't pull it off. He went on to explain that if I could somehow make the primordial chaos artwork, he had an endless supply of techniques for me to combine. And if that actually worked, breaking straight through the Grandmaster ceiling might finally become a real possibility. I didn't catch all the complex martial theory, but one specific keyword caught my attention: fusion. My cheat system automatically leveled up my skills in the background, meaning the more techniques I unlocked, the faster my overall growth rate became. So a method that allowed me to cultivate multiple arts at once, without my internal energy ripping itself apart, was custom-made for my needs. I turned to Elder Qian and spoke up. "First Master, I think this is definitely worth a shot. Here are my decision both." Hu Liangfeng and Zhang Hongguang stared back with deep concern the moment I agreed to try it. Zhang Hongguang broke down the history, explaining that the primordial chaos art was unearthed in a nameless Taoist temple decades ago, and despite countless martial artists attempting to master it ever since, every single one met a dead end. Some suffered chi deviation and went completely insane, almost simply wasted years of hard work on a manual that was fundamentally broken. Hu Li Yinfeng agreed, warning that even with my insane talent, touching this technique was way too risky. I glanced over to Elder Qian to hear his thoughts. He acknowledged that their warnings were completely fair, but decided to give us the full perspective. He revealed that plenty of top grandmasters were actively researching this exact secret art right now, convinced that the real obstacle to breaking past the realm wasn't a lack of talent, but rather the absence of a proper foundational method. Some experts were attempting to use the primordial chaos art to combine their existing high-tier skills, while others were trying to draft entirely new ultimate techniques from scratch, though neither side had achieved a breakthrough yet. Even so, he personally believed that the primordial chaos art still held the absolute best odds. In this modern era, not a single person had successfully developed brand new techniques anymore, since whatever special conditions allowed ancient martial artists to forge such a massive array of styles were simply long gone. If I could actually pull this off, it wouldn't just be a huge win for me. It could completely revolutionize the entire martial world. He had witnessed the dimensional rift firsthand. He knew all too well that against the truly terrifying beasts lurking in its depths, even legendary grandmasters were utterly powerless. Mankind desperately needed to shatter that current limit. He turned to me and explained that his dream was to blaze a trail into the unknown, leaving it entirely up to me whether I was brave enough to step onto that grandmaster path. Without a second thought, I agreed to learn it. My logic was pretty straightforward. If the system could absorb and register the secret art, then it was legit. But if it couldn't, I'd just ditch it immediately without wasting another second. Elder Qian then began chanting the ancient verses. And the very instant he finished, 2 system notifications suddenly popped up. The first message stated that I had successfully learned a unique technique, the primordial chaos art, which strangely came with no mastery bar. Instead, its purpose was to merge any 2 martial arts that had both been cultivated, all the way to the perfection stage. Meanwhile, the second prompt announced that I had unlocked a special condition, known as the primordial chaos state, granting me the ability to train 2 separate techniques at the exact same time without them clashing. As I stared at the pop-ups, I realized the requirements were insanely brutal. Both techniques had to hit maximum perfection before any fusion could even happen. Under normal circumstances, trying to practice 2 distinct styles simultaneously would trigger increasingly dangerous internal chi clashes. And as soon as you pushed past the minor mastery level, the risk of severe internal damage became absurdly high. However, this primordial chaos state completely bypassed every single one of those dangers, allowing 2 different arts to harmonize within my body without ever disrupting each other. And thanks to my system mastering it, automatically, I unlocked this legendary state in a single flash, a feat that Elder Qian's own father had wasted 30 entire years trying and failing to accomplish. Opening my eyes, I saw all 3 of them staring back at me with tense, anxious expressions. So, I decided to lay out the truth, or at least my version of it. I explained that using the technique required entering a unique condition I call the primordial chaos state, where 2 separate styles could circulate independently through the body without any destructive friction. I added that I had already entered that realm, and I believed that once I mastered both techniques to absolute perfection, I would be able to fuse them into one. Hu Yangfeng and Zhang Hongguang exchanged bewildered looks, having never heard of such an absurd concept before. But Elder Qian's face turned completely ghost white in sheer disbelief. Voice trembling, he revealed that my explanation perfectly matched the exact theory his father had developed. His father had spent over 3 decades painstakingly analyzing the primordial chaos art, ultimately realizing it was actually a mystical Taoist cultivation art, not a conventional martial style. Its creator was likely a Taoist master who had simply experimented with martial techniques on the side. His father firmly believed that even the creator himself might have never actually managed to cultivate it successfully in real life. In the end, his father passed away without ever solving its mystery. Yet his final words promised that whoever could truly master this legendary art would rise to a level never before seen in history, a true synthesis of Taoist philosophy and martial power. I offered a dry chuckle and admitted. It really sounded like Elder Chien. Had zero faith I'd actually pull this off. He just shook his head, explaining that while he held out a sliver of hope due to my raw talent, decades of endless failures from everyone before me had kept his expectations rock bottom. Turning toward Zhang Hongguang, he ordered him to impart the limitless art to me. Without delay, he was dying to witness the legendary primordial chaos state firsthand. Zhang Hongguang gave a firm nod and immediately began chanting the chant for the limitless art. Boundless is the path, the physical vessel forged endlessly, unyielding force refined without an end. Zhang Hongguang actually recited the entire incantation a second time, fearing I wouldn't lock it to memory. Little did he know, my system had already integrated it the moment he spoke it, so I immediately got to hyping it up. Listen up, limitless art. You're the newcomer here, so take notes from your senior technique. The Northern Darkness Divine Art. The skill instantly took the bait, awakening its internal motivation drive and auto-cultivating at a crisp 10 proficiency points per minute. I kept egging it on, reminding it that, since it was technically a superior rank technique, it had no right slacking off, and boom, its speed doubled to 20 per minute. That's when the real wild side effect kicked in. The Northern Darkness Divine Art, feeling threatened by this new contender, started grinding like crazy, rocketing its own speed up to an insane 160 proficiency points per minute. That was double its original output. Pitting these two martial arts against each other was turning my gains into an exponential feedback loop. I pulled up my main system interface to check the stats. My current cultivation was at body tempering, sitting at beginner stage with 2,600 out of 10,000 progress. Meanwhile, the Northern Darkness Divine Art had reached minor mastery, sitting comfortably at 24,000 out of 100,000. The newly acquired Limitless Art was sitting at 120 out of 1,000 proficiency. And while I was knocked out asleep, my 8 Extremities Fist had quietly advanced to minor mastery, and a Mountain Collapse Fist had broken into the beginner stage. Both of them still off in their own mental space, farming monsters on autopilot. When Zhang Hongguang asked if I had successfully committed the mnemonic to memory, I shut off the UI panel and pretended to enter a deep meditative state. I had to play the part, right? Just a few seconds later, I felt a firm grip press against my wrist. It was Elder Chien, personally inspecting my internal energy pathways. I could sense it clearly myself. 2 distinct streams of warm aura, navigating through completely separate meridian networks. Deep within my body, one was massive and surging, the other subtle and faint. Whenever their routes intersected, the 2 energies effortlessly yielded to one another in perfect rhythm, never clashing once, almost as if they possessed minds of their own. Elder Chien yanked his hand back, his face a picture of pure shock, and demanded to know if I was manually routing both energy currents myself. I casually shook my head no, explaining that they were circulating entirely on autopilot, guided by a mysterious force preventing any collision. In utter disbelief, he admitted he could vividly feel both chi currents operating simultaneously, tempering my body without a single hint of friction. You see, in the martial world, it wasn't unheard of for prodigies to cultivate dual arts. However, they used to take turns, never activating both at the exact same time. That was because having 2 different internal energies clash directly inside your body could completely rupture your meridians or instantly take your life. It had been an absolute rule for as long as martial arts had been around, and I had just shattered it. He calculated that at the pace I was going, I'd hit the minor achievement stage in body tempering in just 7 to 8 hours. Going from a normal human to entering body tempering took only 4 hours, and advancing from entry to minor achievement took less than a day. He mentioned that he had never seen or heard of anything like this in his entire life. Hu Lianfeng nearly choked on his words, while Zhang Hongguang was left speechlessly stunned. He used to take pride in his master calling him a once-in-a-century genius. It took him 7 days to reach body tempering entry, and 3 whole months to hit minor achievement. Yet here I was about to achieve all of that within a single day. He estimated that my potential was easily 100 times greater than his own. Elder Chien then assigned tasks to the other 2 guys. During the day, they would pass down every single martial technique they knew to me. And at night, we'd head to the rift as usual. No new skills for now, though. 2 was likely my absolute limit until I could merge them using the primordial chaos art. Once Hu Lianfeng and Zhang Hongguang had taught me everything in their arsenal, Elder Chien would step in to take over. By the time my injuries were fully recovered, I'd be right on the edge of major achievement in body tempering, more than capable of hunting monsters inside the rift. He looked right at me and shared something that I etched deeply into my mind. In the world of martial arts, raw power is the ultimate truth. However, a high cultivation stage doesn't always guarantee real combat power. True warriors are forged through actual life-or-death battle. Right then, my stomach let out such a loud growl that all three of them heard clearly. I awkwardly asked if there was anything to eat at this late hour. Hu Lionfeng chuckled, hit a button near the entrance, and within minutes, a guard rolled in a 3-tier trolley loaded with meat, just like a dinner. Hu Lionfeng pushed the cart straight to my bed and told me it was all mine, and I definitely didn't hesitate for a second. By noon the following day, I successfully broke through to minor achievement in body tempering. Those familiar sensations returned: searing heat, heavy sweat, and another layer of dark impurities oozing out, though noticeably less than the first time. Elder Chien explained that this second cleanse was triggered by the limitless art, contributing its own refining power. At the same time, the limitless art also reached the entry level, effectively doubling my overall training speed. At this pace, with both techniques, granting me around 20 realm EXP every minute, I would hit major achievement in body tempering in just 16 hours. Hu Lionfeng then checked in on my injuries. I moved around carefully and realized I was basically back to normal. Achieving 2 realm breakthroughs in a single night had completely healed damage that should have taken 100 days to recover from. Every single time I leveled up, that leftover energy would instantly repair all my broken bones and damaged tissue. That's the real reason stronger fighters live way longer. Their bodies are constantly getting a total refresh. Since I was completely healed up, Hu Liangfeng told me he was ready to start teaching me martial arts right then. I immediately leaped straight out of bed, but he wrinkled his nose and told me to go wash off first. Hey, fair enough. Between last night's sweat-soaked bandages and all the toxins I purged this morning, I smelled absolutely terrible. Once I cleaned myself up, Hu Liangfeng was already waiting outside with a massive saber. He explained that since the Four-Blade sect ambushed me, he was going to teach me their very own signature technique, the deadly 4 slashes. That way, I could wipe the floor with him next time. Consider this my first real lesson in the martial world. Always pay back your grudges tenfold. That's how you make sure nobody ever messes with you again. He then demonstrated the technique for me. 4 rapid strikes, each aiming directly for a fatal weak point. It was simple, brutal, and designed strictly for taking lives. I took it all in once and told him I already had it down. He gave me a surprised look, but moved right on to his primary combat style, the 4 Seasons Blade. It was a postnatal tier saber art, packed with fluid strikes that chained together endlessly. After watching him run through it just once, I told him I got it. He didn't buy it for a second and demanded I prove it. So, I picked up the saber and mirrored every single movement. Sure, my execution wasn't fully polished, but the foundational form was spot on. He just stared at me, suddenly getting super suspicious. Back when he showed me the Northern Darkness divine art, it took 8 whole demonstrations before I could say I'd actually memorized it. Yet here I was, mastering martial arts after a single glance. Was I just playing dumb with him before? I ended up pinning it all on the primordial chaos art, claiming that learning everything became effortless once I comprehended it. Since no one else could cultivate it, there was no way he could verify if I was lying. So he just rolled with that explanation. He decided to pour his entire arsenal into me in a single day. Over the next 2 hours, he ran me through the meteor fist, the heart-crushing palm, the swimming, dragon steps, and a concealed projectile technique called the soul chasing dart. Most of his skills sat at the body tempering level, along with a handful of postnatal techniques, with the 4 Seasons Blade serving as his main go-to style. I executed every single one of them right back to him, without missing a single step. When we finally finished, he just stood there looking equal parts proud and completely dead inside. He had spent decades gathering those techniques, bleeding and risking his life for every single one. Yet I absorbed his life's work in a mere 2 hours. On top of that, my system would eventually max out every technique to absolute perfection, a level he couldn't even achieve with some of them himself. Watching from his bed, Zhang Hongguang just shook his head in disbelief. As soon as Hu Liangfeng sat down, looking utterly exhausted, Zhang Hongguang stood up and announced it was his turn. His specialty was a totally different style of blade, the Tang sword. It was lighter and faster than Hu Liangfeng's heavy saber, making it far superior for 1v1 duels. He taught me the silk weaving blade, the smoke steps, the 8 trigrams, palm, and the bone-crushing fist, on top of the mountain collapse fist that he had already demonstrated. All of his techniques were at the postnatal level, far more intricate and tricky to master. Even so, I managed to master every single move, after seeing him perform it just once. An hour later, he had completely run out of things to teach me. Elder Chien stood up and admitted that I was the absolute weirdest monster he had ever encountered. He warned me that if the Demon Slayer organization ever caught wind of how I train, they would probably dissect me like a lab rat. He explained that martial arts are usually about quality, rather than quantity, since a person's stamina is limited. However, because my techniques train all on their own, none of those conventional rules apply to me at all. Holding up a simple wooden stick, he told me he was going to pass down his primary weapon style, the Overlord Spear, a legendary martial art, handed down from a supreme warlord. Thousands of years ago, it was pure, unadulterated offense, where every single strike charges forward, without ever backing down. As he demonstrated the art, that plain wooden stick in his grip felt just like a genuine spear. Decades of continuous practice had truly forged man and weapon into a single entity. The system categorized it as an innate level technique, demanding a staggering 100,000 proficiency points just to unlock entry level, 10 times more than what a postnatal skill required. Right after the spear art, Elder Chien taught me 8 additional postnatal martial arts: chain cannon fist, tiger subduing fist, sky splitting palm, diamond palm, horse cleaving saber, 6 harmony spear, 1,000-pound drop, and phantom steps. By the time we finished, my system interface registered a grand total of 21 martial skills. I taunted every single one twice to lock them all into auto-training mode. I did some quick math. A typical postnatal technique would take roughly a month and a half to reach full mastery. Body tempering skills needed around 5 days, while innate level skills, like the Overlord Spear, would take about 10 months. To put that into perspective, Elder Chien had trained the Overlord Spear his entire lifetime, and he still hadn't completely mastered it. As for my 2 primary cultivation methods, both were set to hit perfection in about 5 days. Once they maxed out, they would generate enough realm EXP to break me directly into the postnatal realm, going from a total nobody to the postnatal realm in just 5 days. That was a speed that would completely blow the martial arts world away. Later that night, all 3 masters headed out to the rift, leaving me all by myself. So I decided to train the techniques manually for the very first time, and I ended up discovering something insane. Whenever I physically practiced the 8 extremes fist myself, the system counted it as personal encouragement. Because of that, the skill's training speed instantly doubled. After knocking out 10 reps, it doubled again. Hit 100 reps, and boom, it doubled one more time. Every 10-fold increase in my physical effort unlocked yet another massive speed boost. Even better, this training method didn't trigger that dangerous deviation state that verbal taunting risked causing. At higher mastery levels, I could even stack both methods, drilling the technique with my own hands, and then boosted 10-fold verbally. Best of all, these buffs stacked without any limit. By the time my 8 extremes fist reached major achievement, it was pumping out an insane 1,280 proficiency every single minute. At this rate, I'd max it out to perfection in just 13 hours. Turns out, every single one of my original estimates was way off. My progress was about to unfold at breakneck speed. Naturally, I tried applying the same exact trick to the Northern Darkness divine art. I crossed my legs and ran through its full cultivation cycle, by hand for the very first time. At first, the system gave me a positive response, but then it abruptly hit a dead end. Technique incomplete. Cannot increase training efficiency any further. Please complete the technique. I was totally stunned. Incomplete? Not giving up, I moved on to the limitless art next. It started out functioning totally normal, with every milestone in my manual practice ramping up its speed, climbing all the way to 160 per minute. But after 100 cycles, it slammed right into the exact same wall with the exact same alert. Incomplete. So both cultivation arts capped out at 160 per minute. For my hands-on grinding, that's when it hit me. The Northern Darkness divine art could only take someone to entry level Grandmaster, while the limitless art topped out at major achievement Grandmaster. Elder Chien had mentioned earlier that the real reason nobody could ever push past the Grandmaster realm was because every existing martial art out there was fundamentally missing its core parts. These were ancient legendary arts, handed down through countless generations, yet not a single one was whole. I couldn't figure out the reason behind it, so I eventually stopped overthinking it. Maybe the truth would naturally reveal itself once I reached the Grandmaster level myself. For now, I decided to focus entirely on what actually worked. My offensive combat skills were all completely intact, meaning their leveling speed could be boosted indefinitely, without any kind of ceiling. So, I spent the rest of the night hardcore drilling every technique in my arsenal, watching those numbers skyrocket. I pulled an all-nighter practicing every single martial art I had learned, running through each of them 100 times. Turns out 100 reps was the absolute sweet spot because after that, the next multiplier required a whopping 1,000 reps. Definitely not worth the time investment right now. Some of the simpler moves took just a minute or two per round, while the high-tier ones ate up 7 to 8 minutes each. By the time my 3 masters walked back in at dawn, I hadn't even finished half of my moves set. However, the big game changer was that I had officially broken through to major achievement in body tempering. Both of my core cultivation arts had been running effortlessly all night long, at a steady 160 proficiency per minute, generating a massive combined total of 170,000 proficiency and 17,000 realm EXP in just 9 short hours. Zhang Hongwang was the first to step through the door, and he completely froze dead in his tracks. He just stood there staring as I was running through the 8 trigrams palm, absolutely drenched in sweat. Confused, he asked why on earth I was training manually, when my techniques were supposed to cultivate automatically. I casually explained to him that practicing by hand seemed to accelerate the training speed even further. Hearing that, he looked like he'd just been struck by a bolt of lightning. Hu Linfeng squeezed right past him, asking in disbelief if I was actually saying I could push my already ridiculous training speed even further. Nodding back, I watched Elder Qian step inside, grab hold of my wrist, and fall silent for a brief moment. Then, he finally glanced up at me and said, "You've already attained the major achievement level in body tempering." Hearing this, both Hu Linfeng and Zhang Hongwang shouted out in absolute shock, but I just confirmed it, explaining that it actually happened. About half an hour before they even made it back, Elder Qian could only shake his head, admitting that standard logic clearly didn't apply to a guy like me. You see, my cultivation techniques were constantly mending my body the entire time I was grinding, and that massive wave of energy from my breakthrough instantly wiped out whatever fatigue I had left. Any ordinary cultivator training nonstop like that all night long would have completely collapsed. But because my physical form was constantly being reinforced every single second, I suffered absolutely zero drawbacks. Curious, Zhang Hongwang asked me just how fast I was actually advancing, with 2 different techniques running on autopilot at once. So, I gave it to him straight. About 3 more days, and I'd officially hit the postnatal realm. He slumped down onto his bed, looking utterly defeated. I mean, it took him 3 full years just to go from body tempering to postnatal, while I had only been cultivating for 2 days total. Then Hu Linfeng chimed in, saying it took him 8 years. And the 2 of them instantly started squabbling over whose talent was worse. That is, until they both suddenly went dead silent, realizing that neither of them even registered as a blip on the radar compared to me. Elder Qian finally settled the debate by pointing out that they were just regular, average folk, whereas I was someone destined to define a whole new generation. Hearing that actually seemed to ease their bruised egos a bit, since even he, an innate realm master, couldn't hold a candle to what I was pulling off. I then asked if I could head into the Rift World tonight, now that I had successfully hit major achievement. Elder Qian gave the green light and asked what weapon I wanted to wield. A broadsword, a tang sword, or a spear. Without hesitation, I picked the broadsword. After testing out all 3 weapon styles, I felt like the broadsword was undeniably the best fit for hunting monsters. It was massive and heavy, making it perfect for taking down crowd swarms. Sure, the tang sword was precise, but it was way too clunky to maneuver in the middle of a horde. And while the spear possessed insane power, my overlord spear technique hadn't even reached basic entry level yet. Zhang Hongwang raised an eyebrow at my choice, assuming I was looking down on his preferred tang sword. So I broke down my logic, and Elder Qian backed me right up, explaining to Zhang Hongwang that the tang sword actually had a major drawback for fighters stuck in the body tempering stage. Whenever that long blade struck something hard and got wedged in, yanking it back out required a massive amount of raw muscle. You see, postnatal warriors rely on internal energy instead of brute force, so they never noticed the issue. But at my current level, where I still depended entirely on pure physical strength, the heavier, meatier broadsword was actually much easier to control. After clearing that up, Elder Qian took some time to lecture all 3 of us on weapons and deep martial philosophy. Back before taking me in as his personal disciple, he had never shared this level of secret knowledge with Hu Linfeng or Zhang Hongwang. It was clear that something fundamental inside him had shifted. Since he was already giving me lessons, he figured he might as well just teach the whole group. Eventually, a heavy silence fell over the cell, and all four of us rested up, conserving our energy for the night ahead. Right on cue at 8 p.m., Elder Chien unlocked the door, and we made our way out. By 8:30, we had already stepped through the rift. Only this time, fear wasn't holding me back. Elder Chien rented a broadsword for me from the armory, and the cold, lethal gleam off its edge made my heart pound with excitement. Tonight, I was finally going to hunt real monsters, taking my very first steps toward earning my freedom. Elder Chien decided to split our team up. Hu Yangfeng and Zhang Hongguang headed toward the canyon to hunt tier 2 beasts, while Elder Chien would personally take me down to the riverbank, keeping a close eye on me as I fought tier 1 monsters. When we reached the vehicle, I instinctively walked toward the back seat, only to find Elder Chien already sitting inside. He told me to take the wheel, even though I had literally never driven a car in my life. I was thrown into prison right on my 18th birthday, long before I ever had the chance to get a driver's license. Luckily, Elder Chien quickly walked me through the basics. It was an automatic transmission with just 2 pedals. Brake on the left, gas on the right. Inside the Rift world, there were no paved roads and certainly no traffic laws. So I just pointed the nose of the car wherever he directed and slammed the gas. I started out a bit shaky, but I picked it up almost instantly. The terrain was super rough, completely covered in deep potholes. But before long, I was already cruising at 80 kilometers per hour. Elder Chien just sat in the back, totally unbothered by all the violent bouncing. 20 minutes later, I spotted flickering lights up ahead. We had arrived at the riverbank hunting ground. Elder Chien instructed me to pull over a few hundred meters away. I grabbed the broadsword out of the trunk and followed him up to a gentle slope that overlooked the entire chaotic battlefield. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder and said, "Time to prove what you're made of. Go get him." I tapped my body cam recorder to turn on and sprinted down toward the rocky riverbank, using smoke steps to boost my speed. The area was absolutely crawling with fighters, far more crowded than the canyon had been. Hundreds of warriors were locked in brutal combat with beasts across the massive, jagged terrain. I quickly scanned the area for a target and locked eyes on something that looked like a small deer. It was covered in spots, just like a sick deer, but instead of having antlers on its head, 2 massive fangs jutted straight out of its mouth. It looked a lot weaker than the other monsters roaming nearby, so I decided to make it my prey. I immediately shifted from smoke steps into swimming dragon steps, which was far better suited for close-quarters combat. The deer-like beast lunged right at me, moving way faster than I anticipated, but I stayed completely calm. The Deathly 4 Slashes technique activated, feeding real-time combat data directly into my brain. I could instantly highlight its critical weak points: the throat and the skull. First strike, a lightning-fast slash straight to its neck, connecting with absolute precision. Second strike, a brutal overhead chop right into its skull. The creature instantly collapsed dead. I didn't even need to unleash the third or fourth slashes. Satisfied, I turned around. That gave my badges recorder enough time to log the kill before I pulled back to a safe, clear location just like Elder Chien had instructed. Glancing down at my blade, I couldn't believe how easy that felt. Way too easy. The technique just poured out of me, as if I'd been mastering it for years. The second, I committed to using the Deathly 4 Slashes. The ideal line of attack instantly mapped itself in my mind, automatically calculating the angles, the precise timing, and how to dodge while striking simultaneously. I pulled up my system status, only to see the Deathly 4 Slashes was merely at the major achievement level, not even close to full perfection yet. Yet here I was, dropping a tier 1 beast in just 2 moves, during my very first actual combat experience. What I didn't realize at the moment was that up on the vantage point, Elder Chien had practically leaped to his feet. You see, that creature was actually a fong-mouthed deer, a high-tier, first-rank beast that most fighters actively avoided. No other cultivators were anywhere near the thing, which really should have been my first clue. Elder Chien had fully expected me to struggle and take a painful reality check. Instead, I took it down in 2 swift strikes, with the effortless flow of a battle-hardened veteran. Now, my sights were already set on my next prey, a leopard-like beast that hovered closer to the ground, built longer, and rocking deadly talons extending a full 4 inches from its paws. Instinct told me this creature was on a whole different level than the deer, and I was eager to push my limits further. Elder Chien observed the scene from above, caught somewhere between pure amazement and genuine concern. He mumbled under his breath, But the target I had locked onto was a long-claw leopard, the undisputed apex predator of Tier 1 beasts, a monster that even warriors, at the peak of body tempering, had trouble dealing with. He whispered to himself, "Can you actually take that thing down?" Truth was, I had no idea what any of these beasts were called, since Elder Chien had intentionally kept me completely in the dark. Learning to gauge a threat purely through raw combat intuition was part of the lesson he planned for me. Having finished off the deer-like monster, I immediately locked my focus onto a leopard-like beast crouching nearby. It stayed low to the terrain, sporting an elongated frame with wicked 10-centimeter claws jutting from its paws. It looked infinitely more dangerous, so I dashed forward without hesitation. It let out a vicious roar and launched itself into the air, soaring nearly 10 feet high right at me. Most fighters would have jumped up to meet it head-on, but leaping into the air leaves you completely vulnerable without leverage. Instead, I executed a low slide, going right underneath its airborne body. Its underbelly was soft and completely exposed. A deadly fatal flow ide pimpuinta. The very second I laid eyes on it. First slash, carving straight upward into its gut. As I slid underneath, scorching hot blood bursting across my face. Second slash, whip spinning around to plunge the steel deep into its rear, burying a third of the blade right into its flesh. Third slash, snatching the blade free with a brutal jerk. I unleashed a vicious horizontal swing that slammed the monster to the dirt. It didn't even twitch again. 3 effortless moves, and the undisputed king of Tier 1 beasts was dead. Wiping the fresh blood from my face, I couldn't help but wonder, was I actually this overpowered, or were these supposedly terrifying beasts just complete pushovers? I was relying purely on the 4 deadly slashes, a basic body refining style, without even tapping into my Hotion realm techniques. The instant a monster made a move, its critical weak points automatically flashed in my mind. I could instantly map out strike angles, evasion routes, and precise timing long before the beast even closed in. Little did I know, Elder Chien had leaped to his feet, up on the ridge, utterly stunned by what he was witnessing. A total rookie in combat, taking down a top-tier Tier 1 beast. In just 3 moves, until the realization finally clicked for him, I had mastered 21 distinct martial arts disciplines, each packed with its own specialized way of spotting flaws and capitalizing on openings. A single martial art gives you limited tactical vision, but 21 acting in sync, that created a state akin to total battlefield omniscience. This sheer overload of combat instinct, flooding my mind, had reshaped me into a warrior that shouldn't logically exist at my current level. He muttered under his breath that he'd come out here to guide me through my first real battle, yet there was literally nothing left for him to teach. I was already fighting way beyond my realm. I took down another saber-toothed deer, then began tussling with a red-eyed hound, the absolute bottom tier, Tier 1 beast. Right in the middle of the fight, I sensed 4 figures trying to sneak up behind me. I wrapped up the hound with a clean decapitation, and turned around to see none other than them. The 4-blade sex squad, that same middle-aged guy from last night, was standing 10 feet away, sword drawn. Smirking, he admitted he was shocked I'd survived that fall, and even more blown away that I actually had the nerve to return. He glanced down at the dead hound and let out a laugh, assuming I'd barely scraped by killing the absolute weakest creature around. He figured I was still just a beginner in body refining. The old woman, their sect leader, chimed in from right behind him. She'd spotted the slain saber-toothed deer nearby, and cautioned him that I might be far stronger than he thought. But the guy brushed her off completely. He claimed there was 0 chance. Some kid who tumbled off a cliff yesterday could slay a high Tier 1 beast. It had to be someone else's kill. He pointed his blade right at me, stating, "Since we didn't finish the job yesterday, we'll make sure to end you today." Now, the real reason I dragged out that fight with the hound wasn't because I was struggling. I was actually field testing different movement techniques. In live combat, intentionally dodging without attacking. I only put an end to it once I picked up on the 4-blade sect closing in. I planted my sword into the ground and locked eyes with the middle-aged man. He began mocking me, saying he'd already scanned the hillside and didn't see Elder Lin Feng anywhere in sight. I just smirked coldly and hit back, saying I didn't need my master around just to take out trash like him. That instantly set him off, and he lunged straight at me with his blade high, unaware that to my eyes, his entire stance was nothing but weak spots, sloppy footwork, and an unstable stance. His body was swaying way too much, and the hand gripping his blade was visibly trembling. The moment he closed that 3-meter gap, I made my move. One clean, upward thrust right along his torso, slicing straight from his stomach to his chest, and ending as the blade pierced right through his heart. He looked down at his own fatal wound, tried to raise his sword, but couldn't even manage it, as blood spilled from his mouth. He collapsed, so I yanked my blade free, and locked eyes with the remaining 3. Honestly, I was planning to settle this score after I got out of prison, but since you guys came straight to me, let's end this right now. The surrounding crowd immediately started whispering. They recognized the leader of the Four-Blade sect, and were completely shocked that someone had just taken out one of her men. Some assumed I must belong to a powerful family, with secret bodyguards protecting me, while others pointed out that the sect leader was at entry level, postnatal stage, meaning she'd easily crush any body-tempering warrior. The old hag shrieked the dead man's name, unsheathed her weapon, and ordered the other 2 to surround me. One attacked from the left, and one from the right, and with a horde of monsters right at my back, I had to force my way through one of them. So, I struck first, just like Liang Feng always taught me. Attack before the enemy even gets the chance to prepare. Pushing my smoke steps to maximum speed, I closed in on the guy to my left, before the sect leader could even react. Desperate, he threw up the deadly 4 slashes to defend himself, but his form was incredibly slow and clumsy. At best, he was at minor achievement level. I decided to show him what the technique looks like at major achievement, in one fluid sequence. Duck, swing, and lift. He collapsed backward, dead on the spot. The sect leader let out a scream and slashed straight for my head. But with a quick lateral shift, I stepped 2 meters aside and dodged it effortlessly. She yelled for the last remaining guy to strike, and together, he charged at my right flank. I took a few steps back on purpose, luring him in, then instantly reversed my movement. The swimming dragon steps, a technique designed to retreat only to advance. By the time he realized what was happening, my blade was already coming down right onto his skull. I didn't even bother checking if he was dead. Hearing the sect leader right behind me, I whipped around and raised my sword to parry. The sheer impact reverberated straight through my bones. A bizarre force surged down her blade into my arms. This was internal force, the true power of a postnatal realm cultivator. My hands went completely numb, and I stumbled back 4 or 5 steps before I could finally regain my balance. She was an entry-level postnatal cultivator, and in terms of raw power, she outclassed me completely. Little did I know, Elder Chien had already walked down from the slope. He was originally stepping in to save my life, but after watching me slice through 3 tempering fighters in mere seconds, all sitting at the exact same cultivation tier as me, he chose to just sit back and watch instead. He pinched a small pebble between his fingers, ready to flick it if things went south for me. Meanwhile, the sect leader was practically shaking with rage. 3 of her best disciples got wiped out in under a minute. She snarled at me, screaming that I had to be hiding some crazy secret. I mean, yesterday, I could barely even stand on an incline, and today I'm taking out warriors in my own realm, without even breaking a sweat. She vowed that once she killed me, whatever secret technique I was hiding would belong to her, and she'd use it to restore the Four-Blade sect to glory. With that, she lunged at me again, and man, she was fast. Way faster than me, so running away wasn't an option. I narrowed my eyes, tightened my grip on my sword, and thought, bring it on. I instantly recognized her opening stance. The deadly 4 slashes. It was the exact same technique I just used on her lackeys. But since she was in the postnatal realm, there was no way I could clash with her in raw strength. So, I immediately switched to the silk weaving blade, a postnatal level sword style, specifically designed to entangle and trap opponents. It was the perfect natural hard counter to the deadly 4 slashes. Aggressive, rush-down offensive style. Our blades collided, and even with the counter technique, the sheer shockwave almost ripped the hilt straight out of my hands. Postnatal internal force was definitely no joke. She pressed her advantage, driving in with a second strike, aimed directly in my throat. I rapidly shifted my grip and deflected her blade upward, but the raw power behind it knocked me back half a step. She capitalized on that tiny opening in an instant, thrusting her 3rd slash straight for my heart. Realizing I couldn't dodge in time, I activated the 1,000-pound drop, slamming my entire center of gravity down, while holding my sword horizontally across my chest like a shield. Her blade slammed hard into the flat of my steel, sending sparks flying everywhere. At that exact split second, the heavy downward momentum from 1,000-pound drop anchored my feet solidly into the rock, allowing me to spring my torso right back up. The violent recoil sent her flying backward through the air, and that was the one opening I needed. I burst into smoke steps at full speed. She twisted mid-flight and managed to land on her feet, but I was nowhere to be seen. I had already maneuvered right behind her using phantom steps. She picked up on the sudden rush of air behind her and spun around with a desperate, blind reverse slash. It sliced through thin air. I was already ahead of her, gliding from her blind spot right to her front, in one single, ghost-like motion. By the time her brain even processed what was happening, my sword had already painted a red line across her throat. She clutched her neck in panic, blood gushing uncontrollably between her fingers. She stared at me in absolute shock and disbelief, muttering, "Phantom steps," before collapsing lifeless onto her back. I finally let out a long, heavy breath. Man, that counterslash almost got me back there. If I had been even a millisecond slower, transitioning from her back to her front, I'd be the one lying on the ground, bleeding out right now. I took a quick look around, and every single martial artist nearby was completely stunned. Then I caught sight of Elder Chien, standing over at the edge of the stone riverbed, and I quickly made my way toward him. Behind me, the entire crowd just went wild, unable to believe a body refiner had just pulled that off. A mere body-tempering martial artist had actually taken down a postnatal warrior. The onlookers counted at least 5 distinct martial techniques that I unleashed in that single encounter: silk weaving, blade smoke steps, 1,000-pound drop, phantom steps, and the fatal 4 slashes. Some speculated I was a secret heir from a prominent family, while others claimed I could easily dominate the top academy students. Honestly, nobody could pinpoint where a beast like me came from. Once I made my way back to Elder Chien, I asked if we should make a quick exit, before the outpost guards came hunting for me. Over the guy I just put down. He just chuckled, explaining that the Rift Realm had no such laws. Matters of life and death were settled strictly between the individuals involved. No one gave a damn as long as you weren't going on a senseless massacre. Then he paused, adding that we actually did need to leave, just not because of the bloodshed. He pointed out that Tier 1 beasts were no longer any real challenge for me. I had just slain a postnatal expert, so remaining here and farming low-level mobs was a complete waste of time. If I truly wanted to get stronger, I had to throw myself into real danger. "I'm taking you over to the canyon," he announced, "to hunt Tier 2 beasts." I hesitated for a second, though not out of fear. My concern was actually my official Demon Slayer registration status. I had only signed up yesterday as an ordinary civilian, so waltzing into the canyon and slaughtering Tier 2 beasts might raise some serious red flags. Elder Chien casually dismissed my worries. Ton of hunters registered under fake cultivation ranks anyway, and the Demon Slayer Association couldn't care less about your official realm. They only cared about your results. So I followed him up the embankment toward our vehicle. The canyon turned out to be an entirely different ballgame compared to the riverbank. The combat intensity here was downright brutal. A single Tier 2 beast could wipe out a postnatal warrior in one strike if they dared to lower their guard, even for a second. Every fighter active down here was at least at the minor accomplishment stage of the postnatal realm. Still, the steep cliffside was nothing to me. Activating my smoke steps, I glided down to the valley floor like a ghost. Upon landing, I stared out at the massive swarm of monsters ahead and asked Elder Chien if any dangerous Tier 3 beasts were lurking among them. He shook his head in response. Tier 3 beasts only roamed far beyond the canyon, deep past the desolate desert. Those monsters could generate true chi, matching innate level masters, and possessed genuine high-level intelligence. Even with a power level like his, stepping into that desert wasteland was practically a death wish. The handful of Grandmaster innate experts in Hai Ching were all high and mighty clan leaders, blessed with endless resources and zero reason to risk their lives. Because of that, the desert remained virtually unexplored, despite being packed with invaluable spiritual herbs that were worth exponentially more than raw monster corpses. He went on to explain how the guild's point system worked in simple terms. On paper, a single point was worth roughly 10 grand in Federation currency, but in reality, points held far greater value, since they could purchase rare cultivation resources that cash couldn't buy. Curiosity getting the best of me, I asked, what would happen if hunters wiped out all the beasts in this area? He just smirked. What I was seeing here in the canyon and at the riverbank was merely the tip of the iceberg, just a tiny sliver of the Rift World's actual population. You see, these monsters didn't just gather here on their own. Grandmaster-level powerhouses had deliberately herded hordes of beasts into these strictly controlled zones, just so human combatants could hone their skills. Every single time a sector got wiped clean, crews would sweep and haul away the corpses, and a fresh batch of monsters would be funneled right back in. The entire Rift World was absolutely crawling with beasts, with every single species claiming its own turf across a massive continent. Naturally, I ended up asking why the Grandmasters didn't just slaughter all these low-tier beasts themselves and hoard all the loot. But Elder Chien's explanation completely shattered my entire perspective. He revealed that the Federation wasn't merely harvesting resources. They were actively raising a battle-hardened army. Because if high-tier monsters ever launched a full-scale invasion on Blue Star, warriors who grew up on easy handouts would lack the actual instinct to survive and fight back. After all, hothouse flowers can never withstand a real storm. The entire Demon Slayer setup was designed for one purpose: to forge lethal combatants through life-or-death battles. Blue Star boasted over 10 billion citizens, so raw talent was never the issue. What they desperately lacked were fighters with actual blood on their hands. And as it turned out, the Grandmasters had an even grander master plan. Ultimately, their goal was to push deep into the heart of the Rift world, but that required warriors capable of true, devastating combat power. And honestly, that campaign couldn't even start until someone finally managed to break through and transcend past the Grandmaster realm itself. I was still processing all this wild information when Elder Chien suddenly grabbed me by the arm and yanked me back into the shadows. His eyes locked onto a group of figures standing right at the peak of the ridge. "Go alert your second master right now," he urged under his breath. "The Zhang family has arrived. Tell him he needs to clear out immediately. And watch your own back." Hearing that, my heart instantly sank. I burst straight into the canyon, unleashing my swimming dragon steps, weaving past the absolute chaos of monsters and cultivators, until I finally spotted who Lin Feng locked in battle with a massive armored boar. Seeing me return alone, a look of confusion washed over his face. I quickly relayed Elder Chien's dire warning. The Zhang family was on site. He glided his gaze up toward the ridge, his expression instantly darkening. "Zhang Jinya," he gritted out. "I don't spot Zhang Yuanlin anywhere, though. It seems Zhang Jinya just brought his own squad here for rift training." His glare remained fixed on the elderly man, spearheading the unit atop the incline. A major achievement in Nate Warrior, the very bastard who butchered his family and threw Elder Chien behind bars. Then, he turned to me and said in a hushed tone, "I have to disappear." I gave him a quick nod. Without another word, he melted right into the sea of fighters and beasts, moving away from the ridge, fading completely into the gloom on the far side of the canyon. Once Hu Linfeng successfully blended into the crowd and vanished, I doubled back toward the slope, where Elder Chien was still holding his position. By then, the Zhang family squad had already made their way down, and their leader, that formidable old man, was walking dead straight toward Elder Chien. "Qin Tianlong. It's been a while, hasn't it? How's life behind bars treating you? Word on the street is you'll be getting out in 2 or 3 years." Zhang Jinya taunted with a mocking smirk. Yet Elder Chin's expression remained completely unfazed. He simply replied that, thanks to him, things have been going pretty well. Zhang Jinya then put on a friendly act, referring to them as old pals before, turning around to face the group of young Zhang family members behind him. He loudly announced Elder Chien to everyone as the former head of the Green Dragon Gang, heavily stressing former since the gang was long wiped out. The young recruits greeted Elder Chien in unison, with a few of them snickering right after. Elder Chien didn't even bat an eye. Instead, he warned Zhang Jinya not to celebrate prematurely, because once he was freed, a reckoning would come. Zhang Jinya just scoffed and dropped hints that he was right on the verge of hitting peak rank 8, meaning Elder Chien's minor achievement in rank 8 just wouldn't cut it anymore. Elder Chien instantly shot back that 10 whole years had passed. So how could he possibly know if he was still stuck at minor achievement? That statement genuinely rattled Zhang Jinya, and I could instantly tell from his face. He had only managed to beat Elder Chien back in the day, because he was at a higher realm, and even then, it had been a super close match. If Elder Chien had actually reached major achievement in rank 8, matching his own strength, Zhang Jinya knew he'd likely get crushed. Plus, he had the younger generation of the Zhang family right behind him, and if a real brawl broke out, Elder Chien could easily slaughter every single one of them. So he reined himself in, and then Zhang Jinya dropped a bombshell that flipped the script entirely. He cautioned Elder Chien not to naively assume that the Zhang family had taken down the Green Dragon Gang, all by themselves. He pointedly asked why none of Elder Chien's former top men, his 4 protectors and 8 commanders, who were all formidable warriors, had ever visited him behind bars. Were they all dead, or were they simply too terrified? For the very first time, Elder Chien's calm mask completely shattered. He forcefully demanded to know what Zhang Jinya meant by that. Zhang Jinya merely chuckled and stated that Elder Chien would find out for himself once he got released. As he brushed past him, he leaned in and whispered 6 chilling words. Magic City, the Liu family's young master. Elder Chien went pale as a ghost. I had never seen him look so broken before, as if something inside him had completely snapped. He stood there frozen, staring into space, muttering under his breath, Magic City, the Liu family. I stepped up to him and asked what was wrong. He looked back at me, and for a brief second, I caught a sudden shift in his gaze. Pure despair was instantly replaced by something far fierce. He instructed me to push my training even harder in the coming days. I assured him I had been giving it my all whole time, then asked what was going on. He explained that the blood feud against the Zhang clan ran far deeper than we had originally thought. It wasn't just about Zhang Jinya anymore. I glanced over at Zhang Jinya, standing near the cliffside, overseeing his family's training session. I then turned back and told Elder Chien that it didn't matter what level of power Zhang Jinya had reached, even if he hits peak late stage. I was completely certain I could take him down within 2 years. I wasn't bluffing either, because the system gave me that absolute confidence. Elder Chien just shook his head at me. Turns out, the Zhang family wasn't even the real threat here. The real danger was the power backing them up. The massive Liu family from Magic City. They had twin brothers, and both were full-fledged grandmasters. One was at the entry level, while the other reached minor achievement. Working together, their combined force could throw down with a major achievement grandmaster. And after 10 long years, they've likely gotten even stronger. If both of them managed to break through, their team-up power could easily match a peak-tier grandmaster. He reminded me that across the entire world, grandmasters were already ridiculously rare. You could literally count the number of peak grandmasters on one hand. So the Green Dragon Gang didn't just fall to the Zhang family alone. Those mysterious high-level fighters, who suddenly ambushed them out of nowhere. Yeah, they were sent directly by the Liu family. It all actually started with a petty dispute between Elder Chien and a young noble kid from that Liu family. Back then, Elder Chien never could have guessed that such a minor argument would trigger such a brutal and devastating revenge. Suddenly, I fully understood the massive weight he was carrying. This wasn't just some local gang beef anymore. It dragged in a powerhouse family, guarded by actual grandmaster martial artists. My hit list was getting longer by the day. The Yi family, the Li family, the Zhang family, and now this powerhouse Liu family. An elite martial clan straight out of Magic City, backed by twin grandmaster brothers. Honestly, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the pressure. Elder Chien tried to reassure me not to stress too much. He pointed out that if I reached the grandmaster realm myself, the Liu family wouldn't risk an all-out war with me, just to back up the Zhang family over some old grudge. He told me he had absolute faith in my talent, saying my rise was only a matter of time. He and Hu Liangfeng could easily wait 3 years, 5 years, or even a full decade for me to grow. Placing a hand on my shoulder, he let out a heavy sigh, admitting, I probably don't have the strength to get my own revenge anymore. So everything rests on you now. I looked him in the eye and reminded him that a master is like a father for life, promising I'd settle every single debt for him. His eyes turned red with emotion right when I said that. Deep down, he knew that without me, he really had zero hope left. The Green Dragon Gang was completely wiped out, and he couldn't possibly face the Zhang family on his own, let alone the unstoppable Liu family. He suggested we pack up and leave the canyon immediately, since Zhang Jinya had already spotted me with him. He was terrified Zhang Jinya might come after me next. I totally agreed. I had already put my combat skills to the test, and proved that the system's auto-cultivation training worked just as effectively as decades of hard manual practice. All I needed to focus on right now was grinding my cultivation higher. We eventually met up with Hu Liangfeng right outside the prison gates. Elder Chien filled him in on everything regarding Zhang Jinya's visit, including the twisted offer to spare Elder Chien's life if he personally executed Hu Liangfeng. Hu Liangfeng just let out a cold laugh. He sneered, saying that the only damn reason Zhang Jinya hadn't sent him in straight into the prison yet, this was because the Demon Slayer system was under the protection of Grandmaster-level fighters. Elder Chien had a hunch that Zhang Jinya's appearance was more than just a show of force. Dragging that many family members to the rift signaled that something major was going down, most likely a new Demon Slayer policy that Zhang Jian had gotten wind of early on. Meanwhile, back in the cell, I grinded my training all night while the other two chatted. Right around 2 in the morning, I successfully broke through to peak body tempering. I still needed another 40,000 realm EXP. to hit postnatal entry, stacking 32 points a minute from combining both of my techniques. That meant I was roughly 20 hours away. So I kept practicing every single technique straight until 6 a.m., finally wrapping up 100 reps for each of them. Now, all 21 martial skills were leveling up passive EXP at an insane 1,280 proficiency per minute. My body tempering skills were set to hit perfection. In just 14 hours, postnatal skills in 5 days, and the high-tier Overlord Spear in about 6 weeks. I had barely laid down to catch some sleep when Zhang Hongguang barged through the door, looking totally panicked as he blurted out that something huge happened. Hu Lingfeng sat up immediately and told him to spill the beans. Zhang Hongguang revealed that a pair of grandmasters had stumbled upon a massive field of spirit rhinoceros, grass out in the desert, just past the canyon. In 7 days, the demon slayers were putting together a raid team to harvest the whole area under grandmaster protection. Every single stock collected was worth 100 points, which happened to be the baseline entry requirement for postnatal cultivators. Hu Linfeng connected the dots right away on Weizhong. Jinya had dragged so many relatives out to the rift. It turned out spirit rhinoceros grass was the primary ingredient, used to craft spirit rhinoceros pills, a rare medicine that temporarily gives a huge boost to skill comprehension. A single pill went for 1,000 points, and it was practically impossible to find stock, even if you had the cash. I asked a few questions about the pills, but I quickly lost any real interest. Boosting technique compréhension, my system already handled all of that automatically, making those pills completely useless to me. That's when Elder Qian chimed in, telling me I should definitely sign up. Bringing back 50 stocks would completely wipe out my prison sentence. He added that once I was free, he'd personally hook me up with a contact who could help me crush the E family and the Leaf family. Now that changed everything. I couldn't care less about the grass or the fancy pills, but an early release plus a powerful ally to obliterate my enemies? Count me in. I nodded at him, saying the timing couldn't be better, since I'd be stepping into the postnatal realm by tomorrow anyway. All 3 of them went dead silent, staring directly at me with that same exhausted, mind-blown look that I was getting pretty used to seeing on their faces. I slept straight through the rest of the day and devoured another massive feast of meat before heading out. At 8 o'clock that evening over at the canyon, I noticed that the Zhang family was nowhere in sight. Elder Qian cleared up for me, explaining they had only dropped by to sign up as demon slayers and take out a few monsters just to keep up appearances. Their true objective was actually the spirit rhinoceros grass expedition. Over a single week, the points gathered from hunting were mere pocket change for those wealthy clan kids who had seamless access to precious resources straight through martial academies. I called out how totally unfair it was. Guys like us were putting our lives on the line inside the rift, while those spoiled clan heirs kicked back safely in academies, getting fed on the very supplies we bled to harvest. Elder Qian let out a sigh and agreed with me, admitting that was just the harsh reality of Blue Star's martial world. The Demon Slayer organization was actively working to shift the status quo, but the elite families had pulled strings everywhere, running deep even among the grandmasters. Shattering the grip of this clan monopoly was going to take time. He advised me to stop stressing over politics and go hunt some monsters, so I leaped right off the incline. My smoke steps had advanced to the major achievement stage, allowing me to briefly levitate midair, just like the legendary weightlessness moves from classic martial arts. Flicks. All my body tempering techniques had hit absolute perfection, and my postnatal skills were officially at major achievement. Heck, even the Overlord Spear had reached minor achievement. Give it just 9 more days, and every single postnatal technique would be maxed out at perfection too. I ripped right into the beast swarm with my massive broadsword, completely fearless, having over 20 high-tier techniques, instilled total confidence in my combat ability. I used swimming dragon steps for relentless footwork, deadly 4 slashes to strike at critical weak points, and 4 Seasons Blade to maintain non-stop offensive momentum. Even when going up against Tier 2 beasts, I effortlessly dominated the battlefield. The weaker Tier 2 monsters were getting sliced down in a single blow. Of course, I was smart enough to steer clear of the top-tier threats, like the ground splitter beasts and diamond tigers. Taking those down required true internal energy, which I hadn't unlocked just yet. Elder Qian kept an eye on me nearby, while taking down his own prey. He remarked that I was fighting like a warrior way above my current rank, combining 3 distinct movement styles and 3 blade arts into one seamlessly fluid assault that left me practically untouchable. He also picked up on the fact that I showed 0 signs of exhaustion, My auto-cultivating techniques were constantly healing and empowering my body, even right in the heat of battle. I was basically a war machine with infinite stamina. Other fighters operating in the canyon began taking notice of me as well, completely baffled as to who I actually was. Way too young to possess this level of mastery, wielding far too many high-level techniques, and wearing 0 clan emblems. They assumed I had to be a prodigy from some prominent family, out on a field training expedition. Not a single one of them would have guessed that I was actually an inmate from prison number 1, rocking regular street clothes instead of a prison uniform. A special perk reserved exclusively for cell number 1. Right around 4 a.m., a sudden shift occurred within my body. Accompanied by the system chime, I instantly realized I was undergoing a breakthrough directly into the postnatal realm. I immediately disengaged from the fight and sprinted straight toward the canyon wall. Elder Chin instantly flashed over to my side to guard me while I broke through. I dropped into a cross-legged position as a wave of raw energy erupted from my dantian, coursing throughout my entire body as a sudden flash of enlightenment filled my mind. The 4 stages of force. These are the foundational forces of the postnatal realm. Inch force at the entry stage, hidden force at minor achievement, neutralizing force at major achievement, and penetrating force at the absolute peak. Thanks to the system automatically mastering everything, it didn't just spoon-feed me these skills one by one. It unlocked all 4 simultaneously. I was already capable of unleashing peak-level penetrating force, even though my physical stats were stuck at entry-level postnatal. Sure, the massive gap in sheer muscle power meant I couldn't throw down with a real peak postnatal combatant just yet, but the high-level technique and mastery were already baked into my mind. Right on cue, another intense wave of body cleansing washed over me, forcing out the thickest layer of pitch-black impurities yet. Once the dark sludge fully coated my skin and settled, I snapped my eyes open, instantly sensing the unreal transformation. My physique was rock-hard, my muscles visibly defined, and my skin felt completely restructured. The initial body-tempering phase was officially behind me. Every single bone, muscle fiber, and tendon had been rebuilt to a whole new standard. The entire point of the postnatal realm was to relentlessly condition the body until it could handle those 4 distinct tiers of force. And I was already light years ahead of the curve. Elder Chien instructed me to go clean myself up in the river and test out these fresh postnatal abilities. Before we made our way back, spotting a nearby fong-mouthed deer, I decided to test my bare knuckles on it. Without even reaching for my blade, I channeled raw penetrating force straight into my fist. The absolute pinnacle tier of postnatal power. The deadly kind of energy that bypasses outer defenses and completely liquefies internal organs. A single strike had the beast spewing blood from its mouth as it instantly collapsed. Unfortunately, my own arm caved right along with it from a searing wave of pain, muscles burning out and joints throbbing wildly. Turns out, my physical vessel was still just entry-level postnatal, far too frail to withstand the immense recoil of penetrating force. That's when a brilliant idea hit me. What if I routed that lethal energy through a weapon, instead of my own flesh? Noticing a long-claw leopard nearby, I immediately locked target and charged. This time around, I channeled the full surge of penetrating force directly into the flat side of my blade, slapping it hard against the leopard's back. The sword visibly hummed as the raw energy coursed straight through the steel. The leopard hacked up blood and folded instantly, but the exact second it hit the ground, my steel broadsword completely exploded into tiny fragments. Left clutching nothing but a bare handle, I stared in sheer, utter confusion. Standing right behind me, Elder Chien was completely paralyzed in shock, barely able to utter 3 words: penetrating force projection. He went on to explain that what I had just pulled off was a feat most postnatal warriors could only dream of achieving. Heck, even high-tier innate cultivators struggled to pull it off. Projecting penetrating force through a catalyst like a weapon demanded an absurdly profound mastery of force circulation. Under normal circumstances, fighters had to make direct physical contact to transmit penetrating force, but channeling it through a blade granted both insane reach and full self-protection. Basically like bringing a lethal sword to a fist fight. With a cheat technique like this, I could easily crush any postnatal warrior who hadn't mastered it, which was practically all of them. He added that mastering penetrating force projection was practically placing one foot inside the legendary innate realm itself, revolved around projecting chi beyond the body. to execute long-range attacks. A beginner innate warrior could extend their reach about 10 meters. So if I utilized a 5-meter spear to channel penetrating force, I was practically halfway there already. My previous sword had shattered because my entry-level postnatal body was now generating 10,000 kilograms of raw power, essentially the force of a small excavator. Directing that kind of penetrating force meant every single inch of the blade had to endure the absolute maximum pressure. Standard steel just couldn't handle strain, meaning I need a weapon forged from meteorite iron next time. We made our way back to the prison, and over the following 2 days, I stuck strictly to the same routine, resting by day and hunting monsters at night. My weapon of choice upgraded from a simple broadsword to a black meteorite iron spear, allowing penetrating force projection to flow seamlessly through a longer reach. I was an absolute menace inside the beast horde. By the second day, I broke through to minor achievement in the postnatal realm, doubling my raw strength to 20,000 kilograms. At that exact moment, both the Northern Darkness, Divine Art, and the Limitless Art hit perfection, reaching their absolute maximum capacity. I instantly knew what had to be done. It was finally time to merge them together using the Primordial Chaos Art. A surge of excitement rushed through me. If this fusion technique could shatter the 160 per minute cultivation speed cap, it would mean this brand new art could push far past the Grandmaster upper limit. Literally no one on Blue Star had ever achieved such a feat. If I became the pioneer to surpass the Grandmaster stage, I'd literally be reshaping history. The very first warrior in over a century of the martial era to shatter that unbreakable barrier. Back in my cell at 7 a.m. sharp, I pulled up my system panel. Both the Northern Darkness, Divine Art, and the Limitless Art displayed a special icon beside them, so I tapped it. 2 fusible techniques detected. Proceed with fusion. I immediately hit confirm. A massive wave of information from both skill sets, slamming into my consciousness all at once. It literally felt like my head was about to crack wide open. The blinding agony lasted for 3 agonizing seconds before completely disappearing. The system then prompted me to name this newly created technique, so I dubbed it the Northern Darkness Limitless Art. 3 quick notifications popped up right after. The system granted me 10,000 proficiency points as a reward for creating an original martial art, instantly elevating it to entry level. It automatically began cultivating at 320 proficiency per minute, alongside 32 realm experience points per minute. At first, I felt a slight sting of disappointment. 320 points per minute was simply the combined sum of the 2 base techniques, meaning the fusion hadn't granted any extra bonus rate. However, upon checking the actual proficiency requirements, it was obvious this new art belonged to a far superior tier. Advancing from entry to minor achievement demanded a whopping 100,000 points, 10 times higher than what either individual art required. At the exact same stage, as I dug deeper into the core mechanics of the technique, I stumbled upon something that made my heart leap into my throat. The advanced stages kept bringing up a mysterious concept known as liquefaction. If my understanding was correct, that right there was the breakthrough past the Grandmaster level. The next stage that not a single soul on Blue Star had ever touched. It didn't line up with the martial Tao Golden Core concept that Lianfeng had brought up earlier. Yet it clearly hinted at a realm far beyond anything currently known. I immediately switched to manual cultivation to test my limits, and after just 1 cycle, my speed doubled, hitting 640 points per minute. However, after 10 cycles, I hit that same wall, the incomplete technique. Couldn't push it any higher, capping my gains at 640 per minute. It was definitely an upgrade, but still felt restrictive. Then it clicked. I could still master one more skill. Elder Chien had a unique cultivation method he hadn't passed down to me yet. If I took it to perfection and merged it with the Northern Darkness Limitless Art, the new hybrid art might smash right through the ceiling. The numbers made total sense. 10 days to perfect the newly fused technique. 5 days to fully master Elder Chien's skill. And then 1 final fusion. Snapping my eyes open, I asked Elder Chien to pass his technique to me on the spot, causing all 3 Grandmasters to bolt upright. Elder Chien eagerly asked if the fusion was a success, and I gave them a confident nod. I explained that the new art was named the Northern Darkness Limitless Art, and it held secrets about chi liquefaction, which could very well be the key to transcending Grandmaster, though I wouldn't know for sure until I actually reached that stage myself. Zhang Han Kuang immediately jumped in, asking if they could learn this merge technique too. I shook my head. This art required circulating two distinct types of chi at the exact same time, meaning you had to master the primordial chaos art first, and since no one else could learn it, this fuse technique was strictly exclusive to me. Zhang Hongguang's face instantly fell, but Elder Qian had already saw this coming. He told me he didn't mind at all if he could personally mentor someone who shattered the Grandmaster ceiling. He could die happy. He then taught me his secret art, the ocean-embracing art. Just like the limitless art, it was capable of reaching major achievement Grandmaster. I activated it, ran through 100 cultivation cycles, and quickly capped it at that same 160 per minute limit, just like every other incomplete technique. With both techniques active simultaneously, I was pulling in 80 realm experience every minute. Going from minor to major achievement postnatal would take me less than 2 whole days, and hitting peak postnatal would take around 5. Right before the Spirit Rhinoceros Grass expedition began, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. I'd be stepping into that desert at peak postnatal, more than strong enough to handle anything. I pulled up my system panel to check my stats. Every single body tempering skill was maxed out at perfection, and most of my postnatal skills were perfected too. The only thing I hadn't figured out yet was whether combat skills could be fused as well. I took a close look, but no fusion icon appeared next to them. It turned out the primordial chaos art only worked its magic on cultivation techniques. Stepping away from fighting techniques, I brought up a question to Elder Qian about a mystery that had been weighing heavily on my mind. Why did every single one of our cultivation methods feel completely unfinished, even though our actual combat skills were totally intact? He gave a knowing grin, telling me he had been waiting for me to ask that. He then broke it down into 3 main theories. The first one was rooted in history, suggesting that modern martial arts originated from ancient practices within the Dragon Nation. Thousands of years ago, imperial rulers had intentionally tampered with the cultivation techniques, just to keep martial artists weak and safeguard their own thrones. They left the combat maneuvers untouched, since their armies still required lethal fighting skills for war. But they completely stripped away the core cultivation secrets that could turn any single individual into a threat, far too powerful for them to master. This made total sense as to why these skills endured, yet nobody could ever push past the Grandmaster level. Someone had deliberately erased the advanced stages. Now, the second theory was a lot more straightforward. That crucial martial knowledge had simply been lost over time through broken lineages and lost traditions. Believers of this pointed out that even the most high-level combat skills relied strictly on basic chi, and no one had ever managed to create a move that utilized the higher spiritual power of a Grandmaster. The strongest skills capped out at the innate realm, while the highest cultivation arts barely touched Grandmaster, leaving an obvious divide between them. As for the third theory, which came mostly from Western scholars, they claimed that the Grandmaster rank was simply the absolute limit of human potential, and anything beyond that was nothing more than mythical myth-making. Elder Qian admitted he used to half-believe that idea himself, right up until I successfully merged my own techniques. Besides, that theory completely crumbled when faced with historical records, which revealed that every few centuries, throughout the long history of the Dragon Nation, a rare individual would actually achieve the legendary status of a terrestrial immortal, a realm far surpassing a Grandmaster. The most recent legend was Zhang Sanfeng himself, who allegedly birthed the entire Tai Chi lineage, using a custom art he designed from scratch. And interestingly enough, every single one of these figures mysteriously vanished, or ascended to a higher plane right after reaching that tier. Considering what my system had already shown me about my techniques being incomplete and needing to be refined into perfection, I was personally leaning toward that very first theory, that ancient rulers had intentionally sabotaged the techniques across every major discipline, though a few untouched originals managed to survive, hidden away in secret among ordinary people. And that's exactly why these terrestrial immortals kept popping up, time and time again throughout history. Over the next 5 days, I stuck strictly to my routine, sleeping during the day, and hunting monsters all night long. By day 2, I officially broke through to the major achievement stage, boosting my postnatal physical power to a massive 30,000 kilograms. By day 5, I hit peak postnatal, reaching a staggering 50,000 kilograms. That's literally 50 tons of raw force packed into a single blow. Pairing that insane raw power with my penetrating force projection, I could literally punch right through a 5-meter thick wall of solid reinforced concrete. On top of that, My ocean-embracing art had finally reached full mastery. Now I just needed 5 more days for the Northern Darkness. Limitless art to max out completely, so I could fuse them once again. On the evening of the 5th day, we made it to the Rift World an hour ahead of schedule. The Demon Slayer organization had opened up entry right at 7 p.m. for the upcoming Spirit Rhinoceros Grass mission, which was being headed by elite Grandmaster-level powerhouses. The staging camp was absolutely crawling with people, more than I'd ever seen gathered in one place. Elder Chin reckoned that a solid 80% of the crowd were just spectators. 10% were actually qualified gatherers, and that remaining 10% were just hopefuls, praying the entrance rules would somehow get loosened up. He then broke down the martial world's hierarchy for me. 80% in body tempering, 15% in the postnatal realm, and a tiny 5% reaching an 8. On top of that, there were only about 20 grandmasters on the entire planet. Elder Chien cleared a path right through the massive crowd by flaring his innate chi, gently pushing everyone out of our way. We grabbed my meteoric iron spear from the armory and made our way over to the parking lot. And that's right when I spotted them. The Zhang clan had gathered right near the front, and sitting right next to them in a smaller group. I caught sight of a face that instantly made my jaw clench in rage. It was Yimin Yuan, my half-brother, the very scumbag I was rotting in prison for. He had no business being here at all, because from what I remembered, he hadn't even broken into the postnatal realm yet. I turned to Elder Chien and asked if family members got some kind of special pass from a minimum cultivation requirement. He told me he wasn't entirely sure, since the Demon Slayer commander in charge of the Haiqing Rift hadn't even shown up yet, meaning the exact rules hadn't been officially dropped, though he had a gut feeling that the major clans had pulled some strings to get special perks. Then, Elder Chien asked if I had spotted Ejin Shan anywhere in the mob. I shook my head, so Pu Linfeng chimed in, explaining that Ejin Shan had utterly trashed martial talent. His own father, Yi Peng, had dumped a crazy amount of resources into him, just to get him to minor achievement in body tempering. So Ejin Shan stuck strictly to running the family business, and never set foot near the rift. However, Pu Linfeng spotted Yi Peng standing right at the front of the Yi family group, then smirked at me, asking, "Feel like settling your score with him today?" Elder Chien immediately shut that idea down. A grandmaster was heading this whole operation, meaning 0 personal vendettas allowed. Besides, Jinya would jump at any tiny excuse to pick a fight with Pu Linfeng. Pu Linfeng just laughed it off, claiming he was only joking, before adding that at my current level, Yi Peng wouldn't even be a threat to me. He then wondered out loud what kind of pathetic look Yi Peng would have on his face if he ever realized his good-for-nothing son had cast out an absolute martial genius from the family. Elder Chien simply grinned back. He knew my true combat power better than anyone, considering we had just sparred that afternoon, right after I hit the peak postnatal realm. The outcome? A total draw without any weapons, relying purely on chaining my 20-plus maxed-out techniques together. In that fight, I went toe-to-toe for over 100 exchanges against a minor achievement. Innate warrior. He could only manage to hold me back by releasing his innate chi during key moments. My insane knack for picking out openings, while leaving 0 flaws of my own, made me virtually impossible for him to land a hit on. To him, fighting me felt like pounding against a solid iron wall. The second he made a move, I'd strike his weak point before he could hit mine. He realized that with my meteorite iron spear, I could probably overpower an entry innate warrior with ease, though against someone at his level. A minor achievement innate. The outcome was anyone's guess. We kept our distance from the big clans, especially the Zhang family. Even with a grandmaster escorting us today, meaning Zhang Jinya couldn't pull anything, there was no point taking unnecessary risks. Besides, I wanted to lay low. My plan was to crush the E and leave families systematically. Once I got out, not give them a heads up right now. At 7:20, a shadow zoomed right across the sky above us. I stared up in shock. Someone was flying on pure chi alone. That was the signature move of a grandmaster. The figure hovered over the parking zone and turned around, showing dark hair, snow-white eyebrows, and youthful skin on a body that had to be ancient. He carried a black longsword, and something about his presence felt completely surreal. The age of centuries, blended with the vibrant energy of youth in one single person. Elder Chien recognized him right away. It was Wang Penguin, known as the White-Browed, ageless elder. He had been acquainted with Elder Chien's father 15 years ago, back when he was still a Pekinate. He broke through to Grandmaster about a decade back, and despite being well over 140 years old, he barely looked middle-aged. Grandmaster-level experts could live past 300, and reaching that stage drastically reversed their aging process. Since he had ties to Elder Qian's father, that was great news for us if Zhang Jinya tried to mess with us. Wang Penguin definitely wouldn't back him up. Wang Penguin uttered a single word: "Depart." And even though his voice was quiet, it echoed clearly to everyone present. Then he turned and shot off toward the canyon. There were no announcements about cultivation requirements, no restrictions at all. Everyone just took off sprinting. I instantly caught on to what was going down. Wang Penguin kept ramping up his speed, and within minutes, body-tempering warriors began dropping behind. Soon, even those at major achievement, body tempering couldn't keep up the pace. I leaned over and whispered to Elder Qian, "This isn't a free-for-all entry. He's using speed to weed out the weak." Elder Qian nodded in agreement. By the time we cleared the canyon's edge, a crowd of over 10,000 had been thinned down to barely 1,000, almost all postnatal cultivation or higher. The only body-tempering fighters still in the race were young heirs from influential clans, being literally dragged along by their innate level. Elders. So the major families did get a perk, just a subtle one, carrying their kids along. Meanwhile, rogue cultivators either kept pace through pure strength or got left in the dust. And honestly, no one could complain it was unfair, where the rule was simple: just try and keep up if you can. Yet the outcome remained unchanged. Spoiled clan kids who lacked the skill to qualify fair and square still managed to sneak in through family connections. That was the moment I finally saw the game for what it was: a clean facade hiding a totally rigged system underneath. Honestly, that was just how this world operated. After half an hour of trekking through scorching hot sand, we finally arrived at a desert oasis. Even under the cover of night, the ground still radiated intense heat. Elder Qian pointed out that something deep underground was constantly giving off warmth. He specifically warned Hu Li, Yinfeng, and Zhang Hanguang to stay on high alert, since the third-tier beasts lurking here could use qi for long-range attacks. Notice how he didn't bother warning me? Because after our little sparring match earlier that afternoon, he already knew my combat prowess was practically equal to his own. Now, that sparring match was a private secret, something only the four of us knew about. We had traded over 100 blows barehanded, and the only way he could even hold me off was by leaning on his innate qi. With over 20 perfection-level martial techniques under my belt, I was basically an iron wall. I could read every single opening he left exposed, all while leaving zero flaws for him to exploit in return. Naturally, Zhang Hongguang had wanted to test my limits too, and I flattened him with a single punch. His peak postnatal cultivation couldn't even track the movements of my perfection level. Phantom steps. Moving on, Wang Pengfei guided us toward a small lake in the oasis and hovered right above the water. He unleashed a massive surge of qi and slammed a devastating palm strike directly into the lake. The entire body of water violently erupted upward, giving way to a massive, swirling whirlpool that completely drained the lake in just a matter of minutes. With the water gone, it revealed a hidden natural cavern entrance right at the bottom. Elder Qian explained that an ancient formation had been active here, a mysterious array designed to gather spiritual energy and suspend the lake directly above the cavern entrance. And Wang Pengfei's strike had completely shattered it. You see, array formations were long-lost knowledge back on Blue Star. Elder Qian's father had once researched them and even understood the mechanics, grasping the underlying principles. Yet creating one was impossible without specialized formation stones. Wang Pengfei yelled out that we only had a tight 3-minute window before the water began to rush back in. He dove straight into the cavern first, followed closely by the elite family squads, and then the rest of the group, with our team leaping in last. Inside, the cavern was surprisingly vast and far brighter than I had anticipated. The ground was completely carpeted with glowing blue vegetation. Spirit rhinoceros grass stretched out as far as the eye could see, way too much for me to even attempt counting. Wang Pengfei laid down the rules. Harvest with absolute caution, because the true medicinal value resided in the roots. Any damaged roots meant the plant was completely worthless, and anyone reckless enough to ruin too many herbs would get kicked out on the spot. Elder Qian urged us to scatter and gather as much as we possibly could, prioritizing my share first so I could finally clear my sentence. I reassured him that I had already racked up over 2,000 points, just from hunting beasts, meaning I only needed 30 more stalks to hit my quota. He told me not to stress over the numbers, and just put all my energy into harvesting. Turns out, the work was painstaking and insanely tedious. Extracting just a single stalk took nearly 5 full minutes of meticulous digging. After an entire hour, I had managed to salvage 10 intact herbs while accidentally snapping 2. I took a seat to give my fried focus a much-needed break, and that's precisely when a sinister voice echoed from right behind me. Hearing my name, I turned around and locked eyes with Emin Yuan, my half-brother, the very reason I was locked up in prison in the first place. He was standing right there, glaring at me with cold disbelief. He demanded to know how a nobody like me could step foot in here. Before I could answer, Elder Chien stepped beside me and shut him down. I brought him myself. You got a problem with that? Emin Yuan's face instantly went pale, picking up on the clear threat in Elder Chien's voice. He immediately called out for his grandfather. Ihai Ping glanced over, and the moment he spotted Elder Chien, his face tightened up. He hurried right on over and greeted Elder Chien with a respectful bow, calling him Brother Tianlong. Elder Chien put him in his place on the spot. Are we close? Back when your father was still breathing, he had to address me as Elder Chien, and now you think you can speak to me as an equal? Know your place, Ihai Ping. Flustered, Ihai Ping stumbled over his words and quickly corrected it to Uncle Tianlong. He then begged Elder Chien to forgive whatever foolish mistake his grandson made, if only out of respect for the Yi family. Edishaskoft, your family means nothing to me. Even your late father, who's been dead for decades, wouldn't get a pass from me. Your grandson picked a fight with my disciple, and you expect me to just let it slide with a fake apology. Ihai Ping was left standing there in complete humiliation. Sure, the Yi family was a powerful clan, but they were always beneath the Green Dragon Gang. Even with the gang dismantled, Ihai Ping simply didn't have the authority to talk back to Chien Tianlong. Just then, a sarcastic voice sneered from right behind Ihai Ping. Well, look who it is. The mighty leader of the Green Dragon Gang, a mere convict like Chien Tianlong, bullying top families and pulling the seniority card. Have you no shame at all? And as for you, Ihai Ping, your family ranks 7th in all of Haiqing. Why on earth are you bowing down to him? Zhang Jinya stepped out from behind Ihai Ping with a smug grin. He jumped in to back Ihai Ping up, rambling on about the deep bond between the Zhang and Yi families. Then, he turned his gaze toward me and spat, calling me a bastard and claiming my bloodline was impure. Something deep inside me completely snapped. I snapped right back at him. Say that again. You old bastard. You're nothing but a stray dog with no parents to teach you respect. Elder Chien placed a hand on my shoulder, but he didn't hold me back. Instead, he just smirked and said, Wu Dao, you're way too honest. Exposing the truth out loud like that isn't very polite, you know. Zhang Jinya's face twisted in pure rage, unsheathing a long staff from his back. He openly challenged Elder Chien right then and there. Elder Chien called out for his weapon. Zhang Hongwang hurled the black meteorite iron spear straight across the cavern, and Elder Chien snatched it cleanly out of the air. Both masters dropped into their combat stances, but before either of them could make a move, a booming voice rang out from above. Have you two had enough yet? Wang Penguin was hovering overhead, looking visibly irritated. He reminded everyone that he brought them here to gather spirit herbs, not fight. Refusing to let the grudge go, Zhang Jinya pushed back, demanding that I face punishment. Wang Penguin bluntly warned him not to test his patience. Elder Chien lowered his weapon and addressed Wang Penguin with deep respect, calling him Uncle Wang. They briefly discussed Elder Chien's late father, who had apparently been right on the verge of breaking through to Grandmaster before succumbing to his accumulated injuries. Wang Penguin let out a sigh, lamenting how cruelly fate had treated the Chien family. 1302:26:57, 300. 02:26:59, 300. Watching this exchange, Zhang Jinya decided to pivot to a different tactic, pulling out his ultimate trump card, the Liu family. He pointed out to Wang Penguin that Liu Xiaobai was right on the brink of reaching minor achievement grandmaster, and that his own great-granddaughter was set to marry directly into the Liu clan. He subtly implied that Wang Penguin, as a mere entry-level grandmaster, couldn't afford to get on the bad side of the Luo clan. The entire cave went dead silent, with everyone holding their breath to see if Zhang Jinya had just foolishly signed his own death warrant. Wang Penguin's eyes narrowed, and with a cold smile, he retorted, "Test me then, and see if I hesitate to take your life." Zhang Jinya completely froze. He had fully expected Wang Penguin to back off, or at least step aside, but instead, the Grandmaster had called his bluff without skipping a beat. Zhang Jinya just couldn't figure out whether Wang Penguin had a powerful backer hiding in the shadows, or simply didn't fear the Liu family at all. After a tense, heavy silence, Zhang Jinya finally backed down, hurl one last parting threat at Elder Qian, warning that he shouldn't expect prison to keep him safe forever, before walking away. Meanwhile, off to the side, I happened to overhear a conversation between Yi Haiping and Yi Minyuan. Yi Haiping clearly recognized Elder Qian's terrifying strength, warning Yi Minyuan that Elder Qian's old wounds had fully healed, and he might have even become far stronger. Yi Minyuan bitterly cursed me as a lucky bastard for managing to gain such a powerful master behind bars. But Yi Haiping brushed off any potential threat from Elder Qian, reassuring him that Zhang Jinya would handle him the moment he got released. Once Zhang Jinya had left, Elder Qian offered his sincere thanks to Wang Pengwei. Wang Penguin let out a heavy sigh, warning him that while he could shield Elder Qian today, he couldn't protect him forever. The moment Lu Xiaobai officially broke through to minor achievement, Grandmaster Zhang Jinya might actually build up the nerve to strike at the first prison. Elder Qian nodded solemnly and expressed his gratitude once more. Wang Penguin then leaped back into the air to resume his patrol over the cave, and we immediately went back to harvesting. After Wang Penguin departed, I quietly turned to Elder Qian and asked, if the two of us joined forces, could we take down Zhang Jinya? He shook his head, explaining that the gap between minor achievement, innate, and major achievement innate was simply massive, boasting double the chi reserves and twice the attack range. At best, we might force a stalemate, but actually taking his life would be practically impossible. Plus, even if we actually had a shot, the Lu family's twin grandmasters were backing him up. If Lu Xiaobai really hit minor achievement as a grandmaster, those twins combined could easily match a peak grandmaster. So yeah, we couldn't risk exposing my full strength just yet. Elder Qian warned me to stop heading into the Rift World for now. Starting today, he'd dump all his points to buy every single technique and cultivation art available from the Demon Slayer exchange system. My plan was to train inside the prison cell while he kept watch. The second I hit major achievement in innate, I'd head straight for the desert to hunt third-tier beasts and grind my way up to Gold Demon Slayer rank, a title that would unlock a ton of major opportunities. He reminded me that our time was rapidly running out. The harvesting session took 5 whole hours, and I managed to gather 60 stalks, earning 6,000 points. On top of that, my 3 masters handed over everything they harvested. That added another 170 stalks, netting a massive 17,000 points. Stacked with what I earned from hunting beasts, my overall grand total soared past 25,000 points. I officially met the requirements for the Bronze Demon Slayer rank, though I didn't even bother swapping out my physical badge. Back in the cell, Elder Qian handed over more than a dozen postnatal combat technique, along with 2 cultivation arts, capable of pushing someone all the way to major achievement grandmaster. Literally everything the Demon Slayer exchange had in store. 4 days into practicing the Overlord Spear technique, the system pinged. I'd successfully broken through to the innate realm. Man, that breakthrough was absolute violence. The chi inside my dantian compressed violently, whirling faster and faster until something entirely new took shape. A raw innate chi that was far denser and stronger than anything I'd felt before. It surged wildly through my meridians, stretching them to double their size as pitch-black impurities seeped out, forming the thickest layer of sludge yet. Once everything calmed down, I raised my hand, and a faint streak of white chi materialized right above my palm. Elder Qian's eyes practically glowed with excitement. He told me to try channeling it with penetrating force. With a flick of my wrist, the chi launched straight into the ground like a sniper bullet, blasting a fist-sized crater of bottomless depth, right through the solid stone floor. After that, he broke down an even higher-level concept. Since innate chi could actually project outside the body, I could fuse it with penetrating force and launch it right through a weapon. This deadly move was known as double penetrating force. You coat the weapon in chi, transfer penetrating force through the weapon shaft, directly into that chi, and then fire the chi itself like a projectile. The destructive power was on a whole other level, exponentially stronger than using either technique individually. The catch? It was insanely hard to pull off. Even his own father had only pulled it off once. In 10 tries before he passed away, I grabbed my spear, wrapped it in a layer of innate chi, channeled penetrating force down through the shaft, and into the chi, then let it fly. The chi detonated right off the spearhead, carving a massive, bull-sized crater deep into the dirt. First attempt, absolute flawless execution. Elder Qian just stood there, staring at the crater, then at me, and then back at the crater again. His jaw literally hit the floor. He'd spent his entire life grinding to master double penetrating force, and never managed to land it, and neither had his father. A near grandmaster had barely pulled it off. Yet I had nailed on my very first try. He asked me to show him again, so I made another flawless hole. And right then, something snapped inside him. I could literally see it in his eyes. A lifetime of pride in his own skills completely shattered. He'd been praised as a prodigy throughout his entire 100-year career. But watching me effortlessly pull off a technique that stumped even grandmasters made all of his achievements feel totally meaningless. I asked if he wanted to go around with me, but he turned me down right away. With innate chi and double penetrating force on my side, a single strike from me could turn his old bones to dust. He told me to keep honing the Overlord Spear, because once I mastered it and combined it with double penetrating force, even top-tier innate masters wouldn't stand a chance. I nodded, feeling a bit let down. I had gotten so ridiculously strong that I couldn't even find anyone to spar with anymore. A sudden idea hit me as I held my training spear. What if I didn't trigger the penetrating force at the weapon, but started it within my own body instead, pushing it through the spear, and then channeling it into the chi on the spearhead? That would mean 3 layers of penetrating force instead of 2. Back when I first broke into the postnatal realm, my body couldn't endure that kind of pressure. But now at the innate stage, my body was easily tough enough. Elder Chien paused, as he had never even considered that angle. He advised me to test it out with caution. My very first try shattered the wooden practice spear into pieces. It simply couldn't handle the double-layered power. Surging through it, Elder Chien stepped away and returned 3 minutes later, carrying a pitch-black spear. It was his family's heirloom weapon, crafted entirely from meteoric iron. It was heavier, colder, and far more durable than anything the demon slayers had in stock. I gave another shot, and this time the spear held up fine. There was no vibration, no sound, but the chi on the spearhead dissipated the moment the triple force made contact. Turns out the problem wasn't the weapon. It was the chi itself. Innate chi just wasn't dense enough to endure 3 whole layers of penetrating force. And pumping in more chi didn't help either. This wasn't a matter of quantity. It was about purity and strength. Edition confirmed that innate chi maintains a fixed density, no matter how high your cultivation realm is. The only thing that changes when you level up is the total amount of chi you possess. Then, I remembered how innate chi was formed in the first place. By compressing postnatal chi within a spinning vortex, deep inside the dantian. What if I replicated that same process externally, spinning and compressing the innate chi on the tip of the spear, until it condensed into something far denser? I began swirling the chi at the spear tip, using the outer layer to crush and condense the inner core. Gradually, the white chi began turning completely clear. Elder Chien watched wide-eyed with total shock, and warned me to watch my step. He could instantly sense it. That energy was starting to evolve far beyond ordinary chi, he mumbled under his breath, noticing it closely mirrored the chi liquefaction I brought up earlier. Right then, the spear started shaking violently, as the sheer pressure of the condensed chi pushed past what even meteorite iron could hold. I couldn't hold back a second longer, so I unleashed all 3 stages of the penetrating force in an instant. From body to spear, spear to chi, and chi blasting outward. A blinding beam of pure white light burst right from the spearhead, slamming directly into the solid concrete floor. The sheer shock wave shook the entire cell to its core. Right where it connected, a massive, basin-sized crater was left behind, plunging 10 meters deep straight through the solid concrete below. Triple penetrating force. It actually worked. Elder Chien just stood there completely frozen, quietly muttering to himself. He remarked that even a seasoned grandmaster couldn't pull off that level of insane destructive power. You see, grandmasters tap into the exact same innate chi as anyone else. They simply possess much larger reserves of it, and can manipulate it using their mental force. However, what I had just compressed onto that spearhead had clearly transcended the bounds of regular innate chi altogether. He asked me directly if I'd felt the chi getting close to a liquid state. I nodded, telling him I did. It was right on the verge of undergoing that transformation. But I had to pull back because the weapon was trembling so hard, and I didn't want to accidentally shatter his prized family heirloom. The only real catch was the execution time. Condensing chi to that degree just took way too long. In a real fight, this was strictly an ultimate finisher. Absolutely devastating, but painfully slow to wind up. Elder Chien couldn't help but roll his eyes the second I started whining about those drawbacks. He called me out, reminding me that he hadn't even mastered double penetrating force yet, and here I was, complaining that the triple version wasn't practical enough for me. With that, he grabbed the spear right out of my hands, realizing that watching my execution had sparked a brilliant idea. By utilizing the shaft of the spear as a conduit to channel the energy, he could bypass that ridiculously hard step of projecting chi outward, allowing him to pull off his very own version of the double penetrating force. He put it to the test right then and succeeded, even though his modified variation only worked at point-blank range. The energy transfer would only trigger when the tip of the spear made physical contact with the opponent. Still, for a guy who had spent his entire life trying to unlock this technique, it was a massive breakthrough. He stared down at the spear, then looked up at me, shaking his head with a tired, amused smile. Despite supposed to be teaching me, he was the one who ended up taking notes from his student instead. By the next afternoon, my system chimed with a notification. The Northern Darkness Limitless Art had officially hit maximum mastery. That familiar icon popped up in front of me, and I immediately merged it straight into the ocean, embracing art without a second thought. This time around, there wasn't a single wave of pain. All that brand new data integrated into my mind in literally 1 second. I decided to name this newly created technique the Myriad Fusion Art. Short, sweet, and straight to the point. Since I planned on stacking even more techniques into it as time went on, I didn't want a ridiculously long name that kept piling up words. The system instantly granted me a massive 30,000 baseline proficiency, unlocking entry-level status right away and boosting my auto-cultivation speed to a solid 800 points per minute after just a single manual training session. It managed to double, reaching 1,600 after 10 full cycles. Yet, I hit a dead end because the technique was still incomplete. My hard limit was capped right at 1,600 per minute. So, I dove deep into studying the core principles of this new art. Surprisingly, no new cultivation realm had opened up for me. The system still clearly outlined that chi liquefaction was the ultimate way forward, only offering far greater detail and efficiency than before. That's when I picked up on the pattern. A new realm only unlocks when your starting proficiency crosses a tenfold threshold. Since my Myriad Fusion Art kicked off at 30,000, I was going to need 100,000 points to break into the next stage. Fusing a Grandmaster level technique into it would give me roughly 20,000 proficiency. I still had 2 more arts sitting in my Demon Slayer stash, which would bump my total up to around 70,000, meaning I was still 30,000 points short. I straight up told Elder Chien that I needed more techniques. He explained that on all of Blue Star, there were barely a dozen arts capable of pushing someone to Major Grandmaster. In fact, the Demon Slayer system only held 3 of them, while the rest were strictly guarded by top-tier sects and academies. He promised he'd try to pull some strings to bring in more, but warned that it would take time. Out of nowhere, Hu Lin Feng sat up from his bed and quietly spoke up. Actually, I have one, and it can push past the Grandmaster level. The entire cell went dead silent as Elder Chien stared at him in disbelief. You mean, the carefree art? Hu Lin Feng gave a nod, sending Zhang Hongguang into a full-blown rage. You've been holding out on us this whole time. Hu Lin Feng snapped back, reminding him that it was the sacred heritage of the ultimate carefree sect, something he never would have revealed if I didn't desperately need it. Zhang Hongguang chimed in, pointing out that the carefree sect had been utterly wiped off the map decades ago, completely annihilated, precisely because they owned the legendary carefree art, which was rumored to break straight through the Grandmaster ceiling. The irony was, the sect itself had never even produced a single innate warrior. Meanwhile, the splintered Northern Darkness sect had far better results using their Northern Darkness divine art. Hu Lin Feng explained that his master was once the technique elder of the carefree sect. Knowing this art would only bring calamity upon them, his master secretly entrusted it to Hu Lin Feng, an unofficial disciple, bypassing all the senior students. However, the technique itself was incredibly bizarre. It worked perfectly all the way up to the peak postnatal stage, and then just hit a brick wall. His master always suspected that the manual they possessed was incomplete, yet no one could ever figure out what was missing. He looked right at me, warning that if I chose to learn it, I'd be taking on the blood feud of the entire carefree sect, as the culprits who wiped them out were still very much alive. Then he let out a sigh, brushing aside his own condition. The technique was completely useless in his hands anyway. So, if I could actually make it work, it would finally honor his late master's legacy. Come closer, he urged me. I'll whisper it to you directly. And with that, Hu Lin Feng passed down the carefree art in a quiet whisper. Once he finished, I assured him I had every word memorized. But when I checked my system panel, something was seriously off. The starting proficiency displayed, carefree art, not learned, showing 0 out of 10, meaning it took a mere 10 points just to reach entry level. That meant, at its absolute best, this art could only carry someone to the low-tier, postnatal realm. It's literally 100 times weaker than the Northern Darkness divine art. So, I ended up asking Huli Infong if he was totally sure this could actually surpass the Grandmaster level. He just said that he was simply passing down what his master handed over to him. Then he confessed that the Carefree sect had actually never produced a single innate warrior, and that most of their members eventually swapped over to the Northern Darkness divine art, breaking away to form the Northern Darkness sect instead. I laid it out straight for him, telling him this skill felt like it capped out right at the postnatal stage. He furrowed his brows, wondering out loud if the manual had really been tampered with. Right then, I started activating the technique. The Carefree art and the Northern Darkness divine art. I had already mastered the latter to perfection. Since both came from the exact same root, I gave it just one small nudge of activation, and boom, the auto-cultivation speed instantly shot, all the way up to 160 points per minute. That was completely insane for a skill sitting at only 10 base proficiency. Clearly, something huge was going down, and right on cue, a massive wall of system notifications started flooding in. The system officially recognized the Carefree art as the direct continuation of the Northern Darkness divine art. It inherited all the accumulated stat boosts from the Northern Darkness technique, instantly maxing out to absolute perfection right on the spot. And since the Northern Darkness divine art had already been assimilated into my myriad fusion art, the Carefree art was automatically integrated into the mix as well. The system then prompted me to name this upgraded technique. So I decided to keep the name as the Myriad Fusion Art. The payout? A staggering 100,000 base proficiency points. That was the exact threshold I had been grinding to reach. A whole new tier of power had finally been unlocked. I closed my eyes to dive deep into the inner workings of this brand new technique. The upgraded Myriad Fusion Art was now anchored mainly around the core framework of the Carefree art, and suddenly, everything made sense. The Carefree art was never meant to be cultivated on its own in the first place. It was actually the second half of the Northern Darkness divine art. You had to master the Northern Darkness technique to perfection first, push all the way to the minor achievement of the Grandmaster realm, and only after that would the Carefree art actually start working properly. That explained why the entire Carefree sect had been trapped at the postnatal stage. For endless generations, they had skipped the crucial requirement, and buried deep within the core secrets of this new technique, I spotted it. The Martial Dao Golden Core. Beyond the Qi liquefaction realm lay condensation, where you compress liquid Qi straight into a solid core. The mythic realm Hu Lianfeng had once brought up as nothing more than a rumor from an ancient text. I literally couldn't hold back my excitement. Second Master, it's the Golden Core. It actually exists, I shouted. Hu Lianfeng suddenly broke out of his train of thought, completely stunned. What? The Carefree art can actually reach the Golden Core? I shook my head and clarified that the Carefree art, on its own, could only peak at the top of the liquefaction realm. However, when fused alongside the limitless art and the ocean-embracing art, my myriad fusion art could take me all the way straight to the Golden Core level. Hu Lianfeng instantly caught onto the mind-blowing reality of what I was saying. So, the Northern Darkness, the divine technique, and the Carefree art were actually two halves of a single skill. I managed to confirm this after Elder Qian pieced together their history. It turns out the Carefree sect had deliberately split their founder's original ultimate technique into two separate parts to prevent anyone from stealing it whole. Whoever performed that division was a complete genius, allowing both halves to function entirely on their own. However, even the original unified manual had been altered over time. On its own, the Carefree art could only get a cultivator to the liquefaction realm, far short of the Golden Core. My newly fused version pushed beyond that limit, simply because I had integrated several other arts into it. Seeing this, Zhang Hanquang sneaked over to Hu Linfeng and eagerly asked if he could learn the Carefree art too. Hu Linfeng, however, reminded him that mastering the Northern Darkness divine technique was an absolute prerequisite, and it couldn't coexist with any other skills. To learn it, Zhang Hanquang would have to cripple his entire cultivation level and start completely from scratch, making him back off instantly. Elder Chen then laid out the harsh reality for everyone present. without a miracle like the primordial chaos art, to combine multiple techniques seamlessly. None of them could replicate what I just did. Their only chance of advancing was to locate the higher-tier follow-up techniques that matched their current cultivation paths. Otherwise, Grandmaster level would be their absolute limit forever. Meanwhile, my new Myriad Fusion Arts auto-cultivation speed shot up to a staggering 1,600 points per minute, granting me 160 realm experience points every single minute. The legendary path to the Golden Core realm was finally open, and I was literally the only cultivator on all of Blue Star capable of walking it. Hu Linfeng seemed visibly relieved, knowing that the carefree art could indeed break past the Grandmaster threshold. I then asked him straight up who was responsible for wiping out the carefree sect. He just shook his head, wanting to keep me out of that dangerous vendetta. But Zhang Hanquang blurted out the truth anyway. It was Li Chonghua and his notorious Myriad Laws sect. Hu Linfeng barked at him to shut his mouth. Yet Zhang Hanquang argued the obvious truth. At the terrifying rate I was growing, even a peak Grandmaster wouldn't pose a threat to me for long. Elder Qian then stepped in to fill in the grim details. Li Chonghua was actually one of the pioneer martial artists. From the moment spiritual energy first reignited on Blue Star, over 100 years ago, he had only begun training in his 30s, and managed to reach Grandmaster by his 70s. An astonishing achievement during such a resource-starved era. Once he attained the rank of Grandmaster, he established the Myriad Laws sect, a faction built solely around the ruthless goal of plundering every secret martial technique in existence. They had annihilated more than 20 sects, including the unfortunate Carefree sect. To make matters worse, Li Chonghua mastered a sinister art, known as the Demon Cloud Palm, sparking heavy rumors that he was the true successor to the Demon Gate, a 400-year-old evil faction that slaughtered weaker warriors to drain their blood and devour their cultivation. That terrifying Demon Gate was only put down when Zhang Sanfeng, the last legendary terrestrial immortal, finally intervened. Elder Qian warned me that Li Chonghua's battle prowess easily ranked him among the top 3 powerhouse fighters on the planet. So until I hit peak Grandmaster status, I needed to avoid crossing paths with that monster at all costs. I decided that my quest for payback against that 6th-tier foe would just have to hold off until I completely eclipsed the Grandmaster realm. Over the next few days, I fell into a steady routine, practicing the Overlord Spear technique by day and hunting down beasts by night. The new Myriad Fusion Art gained 3,200 proficiency points per minute during manual cultivation, yet it still hit a wall after 10 full cycles due to being incomplete. At this rate, mastering it completely would take me 24 days. By day 2, I hit minor mastery in the innate realm. Day 6 brought major mastery in the innate realm. By day 12, I reached peak innate realm. And on the 20th day, the system alert rang out. Grandmaster realm. The breakthrough hit me like a truck. An 8th wave of chi exploded from my dantian, shooting straight toward my brain as agonizing pain split through my head. Then, something shattered open inside the upper dantian, the true core of consciousness. A massive surge of spiritual force blasted outward from my body, carrying my innate chi along with it. This was true spiritual energy, the hallmark power of a true Grandmaster. It transformed pure thought into physical force, allowing me to manipulate chi outside my own body, reining my chi back inside. I projected my spiritual sense outward. First, it washed over my entire cell, then expanded to swallow the entire prison block. I could instantly sense every single inmate in every room, tracking their exact locations and subtle movements, even though I couldn't discern facial features or fine details through thick concrete barriers. This was the supreme edge of a Grandmaster, sensing any hidden threats long before they strike. The massive aura burst snapped my 3 masters wide awake. Hu Linfeng stared right at me in utter shock, while Zhang Hongguang mumbled under his breath that it had barely been a month since I first stepped onto the path of martial arts. Elder Qian simply confirmed the unbelievable truth. Spiritual force projection, the indisputable hallmark of a Grandmaster. My skin underwent another physical transformation, becoming smooth and glowing like a newborn baby's. The body cleansing process was milder this time around, yet the spiritual rebirth felt far deeper. Elder Qian then asked when I intended to leave the prison. My accumulated points were already more than enough to buy my freedom, but I had just learned about a special perk, reserved strictly for gold-tier demon slayers. The authority to command the entire demon slayer garrison in whichever city they visited. That was the real power I wanted. Not just individual strength, but legitimate institutional authority. I didn't want to just slaughter my enemies. I wanted to crush them through the law, using a system they couldn't possibly wiggle out of. I told Elder Chien I wasn't heading out just yet. I'd hold off until I officially reached the Gold Demon Slayer rank. That meant racking up about 1 million points, but at the Grandmaster level. Slaying tier 3 beasts would be a breeze. 10 months should easily be enough. He just nodded along, telling me it was my call. 10 months it is, then. Only then would I step past those heavy iron gates and settle every single debt waiting for me outside. And so, over the next few months, I keep blending skill after skill into the main fusion technique, where every combination boosts my base proficiency and speeds up my training. 4 days after hitting Grandmaster, I pull off the first fusion, and 12 days after that, I do it again. Elder Chien pulled every string he had to sneak new cultivation manuals straight into my cell, and I absorbed every single one of them. Eventually, my training efficiency capped out at 1/10 of my starting level. The system informed me that I had maxed out my skills and natural potential, but even with the cap, the stats were mind-blowing. After merging 10 different techniques in total, my myriad fusion art hit a massive 300,000, starting proficiency, leveling up at 30,000 points per minute, gaining 3,000 realm experience every single minute. My cultivation level rocketed upward. I reached Minor Grandmaster on day 12, and Major Grandmaster just 6 days later. After reaching that peak, it took 12 more days to advance further, until the 20th day after becoming a Grandmaster, when a system pinged one more time. I had ascended past Grandmaster into the liquefaction realm. This breakthrough was far more agonizing than any before. Every bit of innate chi inside my body was forced into a swirling vortex. Deep in my dantian, the cloud of chi condensed in a heavy fog, which then turned to thick mist until finally a single, glowing white droplet condensed at the center of the vortex. Then came another and another until the process finished, leaving my dantian completely empty of gaseous chi. In its place was a pool of pure white liquid, innate true liquid essence. The moment it started circulating through my meridians, an unbearable agony washed over me, worse than anything before. It literally felt like my energy pathways were being ripped to shreds. But after every single pass, a soothing warmth surged through to heal the damage, expanding my meridians and making them vastly tougher. 10 full cycles later, the fluid flowed effortlessly, without a single trace of pain. I balled my hand into a fist, making the surrounding air visibly vibrate. My raw power had skyrocketed to at least 1,000,000 kilograms, if not way higher, when I funneled that liquid energy straight into the ancestral spear and unleashed my triple penetrating strike. The resulting explosion blew straight through a massive hill, blasting a tunnel clean through to the other side. Looking at the devastation, only one thought crossed my mind. This level of power wasn't human anymore. 1 month later, I hit minor liquefaction, and 2 months after that, major liquefaction, pushing my Demon Slayer points past 1,000,000 to reach gold rank. Meanwhile, far away from the prison, the 6 founding Grandmasters of the entire Demon Slayer organization were holding an emergency meeting over an 18-year-old kid who had somehow climbed from a total nobody to a gold Demon Slayer. In just 7 short months, they debated whether I was even real, analyzed every frame of my battle tapes, and wondered if I possessed the mythical sacred martial physique. They wanted to drag me to headquarters immediately, but every single one of them was tied down holding off monster outbreaks during the peak breeding season, so they agreed to hold off for a month. I had no clue any of this was going on. As I stepped back inside cell 108, seeing me hold the prestigious gold badge, Elder Chien stared at me and asked in a quiet voice. When asked if I was set to go, I gave a quick nod. He handed over a name alongside a specific location. Ghost 7. This contact was supposed to gather intel on every single one of my targets. And if I ever needed it, Ghost 7 was also capable of pulling together the leftover members. From the Green Dragon Gang, Elder Chien advised me against making a hasty move on the Zhang family, telling me to hold off until his release so we could strike together. He even dropped a warning that, regardless of how strong I become, certain advanced weaponry here on Blue Star could still end my life. Who? Li Yinfeng offered a subtle grin, simply telling me to stay safe out there. He really didn't have much else to add, since Elder Chien had already covered all the bases. Zhang Hongguang stared back at me with a look of quiet affection. He mentioned that those who wronged him were already 6 feet under, and his biggest sorrow was his missing daughter. She had been snatched by human traffickers right before he got locked up, and he never managed to trace her. So he asked if I could keep an eye out for her if possible. If I happened to locate her, I was just supposed to bring her by for a visit. And if I couldn't find her, well, it had already been more than a year. He honestly had no idea if she was even still breathing. His voice trailed off as he gave a gentle shake of his head. Never mind, just make sure you watch her back. I turned my eyes toward my three masters, the very men who had taken a penniless, framed orphan, and molded him into the absolute strongest warrior on Blue Star. I offered them a deep bow, expressing my gratitude for everything. As soon as I handle my business, I'm coming straight back to bust all three of you out. Elder Chien simply told me to get going. Stay sharp, while Hu Lin Feng chimed in to just leave, telling me not to glance back since it brings bad fortune. Meanwhile, Zhang Hongguang just stood there with a faint smile. Giving one final bow, I pushed open the cell door and made my way toward the prison exit, never once looking behind me.